Good afternoon, I'm Anthony Newbold. Welcome to the Parliamentary Channel's live coverage of the House of Assembly debate on the 2013-2014 budget continues. The member for Nassau Village, Dion Smith, the Deputy Speaker, completing his presentation on the floor. Let's join them now as they prepare for this afternoon session.
The Chair will oblige and recognize him at this time. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Nassau Village.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yes. Mr. Speaker, before I would have left, or before we would have suspended for lunch, I was just wrapping up and talking about crime, Mr. Speaker. And I was indicating save and accept, Mr. Speaker, for crimes of passion. It is my opinion that most persons commit crime because they feel confident that they will not be caught. So I would therefore like for us, Mr. Speaker, to remove this false belief from the minds of would-be criminals. And when I say us, Mr. Speaker, I mean all of us, because it is all of our duty. As I would have indicated, crime affects all of us. So let us send a clear message, Mr. Speaker, that no matter where you are or where you commit a crime, you will be caught, swiftly prosecuted, and if convicted, sentenced accordingly. Swift justice is correct. Mr. Speaker, I would now like to move on to talking about the floods and the way in which they would have affected my community. Mr. Speaker, I wish to note that many of my constituents were affected by the latest heavy downpour of rain in New Providence. And by all accounts, Mr. Speaker, and the reports that I have received thus far, this intends to be a very active hurricane season. Therefore, flooding is a very serious concern for us, Mr. Speaker, in the Nassau Village constituency and other constituencies as well. We note, Mr. Speaker, that the drain system do not always work well, as some of the constituents lost furniture and appliances as a result of the heavy rain last month. So, Mr. Speaker, what I would like to do is suggest a more proactive approach to combating this problem of flooding. You know, while we must allow for the engineers and the technical experts in this area to do their studies and make recommendations on the way forward to address this problem, similar to what the member for Bamboo Town talked about, I do believe that we can offer some temporary relief to those areas known for flooding. And I must say, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Works and Urban Development have been responding to my call. You know, on one occasion I would have indicated through you that I hope the minister would have received my letters as it related to the flooding in my area. And Mr. Speaker, just before coming back in here for lunch, I got a response that indicated, Mr. Speaker, that they were in receipt of my letters, and it indicates that they were referred to the Civil Design Section. Attention, Mr. David Bullock, for review and necessary response. So I'm quite pleased, Mr. Speaker, with the address in which I'm getting from the Ministry of Works when I make my problems known. Once again, I want to commend the Minister for Ministry of Works and Urban Renewal, the member for Rum Island, Catke, and San Salvador. Rumkey.
I thought I heard Catke. Rumkey.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, my suggestion is during and after the rain, we could dispatch cesspit trucks to those areas, and they can pump water into their tanks and taxi this water out to sea. This will help to keep the water level down, and it will avoid water from overflowing into persons' homes. Mr. Speaker, I've seen this done in the Pinewood area during the last time that we had the floods, and it did work wonders, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, I must also note that NEMA has been around. They've been addressing the complaints. They would have, based on the complaints, assessed the damage to homes and furniture, and they have indicated through Captain Russell that very soon some relief will become available to those affected. Mr. Speaker, as well, I must also mention social services, because they have been doing a fine job in helping persons in my area that need it most. So, Mr. Speaker, while on the topic of social services, I must commend the member for Yamakroa, who's been doing a fine job in her ministry. Many of my constituents receive regular food or rent assistance, and they always mention to me how once they can prove the necessary requirements, they are helped efficiently and they are helped in a timely manner. Mr. Speaker, this is nothing to be ashamed of, because the best of us need help at times. You know, I want to encourage social services to continue to do their best to help those that need it most. And Mr. Speaker, I want to move on a little and get into education. But before I do that, Mr. Speaker, I must not only commend but salute the member for Marathon for the fine job that he has been doing with education in his ministry. This budget has also made provisions to rent and renovate Our Lady's Catholic Primary School to accommodate some 100 special needs children. You know, Mr. Speaker, my government is even going further in this area as we plan to construct in New Providence a multi-purpose facility for persons with special needs. It is also the intention of my government to provide more facilities in schools for persons with special needs. Speaking of persons with special needs, Mr. Speaker, on Saturday, while I was at my community center doing my community hours, a young lady from my constituency came in with her son who has special needs, you know, and I said that this is so timely that we are doing all of this for persons like yourself. Right. And they were very pleased, Mr. Speaker, to hear that. Absolutely. Yes. It is also, Mr. Speaker, I wish at this point to personally thank the Right Honourable Member for Centerville for this bold initiative. I have several families in my constituency who are overjoyed by these plans, similar to the persons I would have mentioned on Saturday. So I now say, and I say it loud and clear, Mr. Speaker, I now say to the naysayers, how is that for doubling the investment on education? Only, Mr. Speaker, only a compassionate, caring government will take these kinds of steps, and that is what we are. Mr. Speaker, we on this side are real people, and we care about all of our citizens, Mr. Speaker, and we want every last one of them to realize their full potential, whether they are children with special needs or Rhodes Scholars. Mr. Speaker, we will also invest, Mr. Speaker, over $4 million next year to establish the new School of Agriculture and Marine Resources in North Andros. Big move. This school will be an adjunct to the College of the Bahamas and will offer diploma and certification programs as well as skills training. I say again to the naysayers, how is that for doubling the investment on education? Right. Mr. Speaker, I want to at this time, though, serve notice that I reserve space for my constituents who will want to take advantage of this opportunity. Yes. Mr. Speaker, in moving on, I wish to now talk about the electricity and electrical connection problems in the Bahamas. Many of my citizens, Mr. Speaker, were still without electricity upward until we began our new aggressive reconnection plan at the Bahamas Electricity Corporation. Our plan was to reconnect thousands of residential customers by June 1st, just gone. You know, Mr. Speaker, this plan received even the support of the former chairman of BEC, Mr. Michael Morse. And this exercise was so important. And even though, Mr. Speaker, many persons have been reconnected, we have to help people who need help in this area. Mr. Speaker, while I support and commend all the efforts of the member for Tall Pines, I think he too should be commended, but I encourage him not to stop there, but to push on, Mr. Speaker, until we have almost 100% reconnection in BEC. In this modern time, you know, I find it unacceptable for people to be living without electricity, Mr. Speaker. We must do all that we can to ensure that all citizens who are prepared to meet the necessary requirements get reconnected. It often bothers me, sir, when I walk into homes in my constituency and I find people living without electricity, especially those who have young children. You know, nowadays, Mr. Speaker, some persons have even electrical pumps. So they even need electricity to get water. So could you imagine, Mr. Speaker, living with 5 or 6 young children and you have no water, much less light? We truly need to give help in this area. Mr. Speaker, I welcome the recent statement by the Right Honourable Member for Centerville that we could see a 6.6 decline in the cost of electricity. We truly need to see this decline, as the cost of electricity is currently too high, sir. This decision to exempt the Bahamas Electricity Corporation from excise tax on fuel imports as a part of the 2013-2014 budget is an excellent one, Mr. Speaker. My constituents look forward to this added relief. Mr. Speaker, moving on, some $10 million have been allocated to the capital budget of the Ministry of Works and Urban Development for urban renewal and small home repairs. This program, Mr. Speaker, will support much-needed improvements in the substandard housing conditions many of the poor among us endure. I say to the many contractors in Nassau Village that who better to offer these services to the people of our community than us? You know, some of my constituents, when I told them all week we were debating the budget, some of them said, well, can you put me in the budget? Or they would say, well, what is in the budget? Or they would say, what is in the budget for me? So this is where I talk to them now, Mr. Speaker, because this speaks directly to job creation. And it's an opportunity to help many of our small and medium-sized businesses in the community. I say, here is something directly with your name on it. Go out and take advantage of it. Mr. Speaker, I also want to talk about the new national training agency that will come into operation shortly. It will equip attendees with the necessary skills to become gainfully employed, and it will make persons attending more marketable in the employment market. You know, we would have heard the member for, I never remember where the member is from Mr. Perry Gomez, Minister. North Andres.
And the berries.
North Andres and the berries. You would have heard him speak about the program, the 52-week program, and indicated, well, who were trained and how did we know that they were suitable for the job? Well, you see, this is a different approach, Mr. Speaker, from prudent governance. We are now putting a plan in place to train our people and to make sure, as I said, that they will have the necessary skills to become gainfully employed. It will make persons attending more marketable, as I indicated. This agency will provide both training for jobs coming on stream and placement assistance to workers trying to find a job. Mr. Speaker, I now move to talk about tourism, and in so doing, I must commend the member for West, Grand Bahama, and Bimini, for he too is doing a fine job in his ministry. Mr. Speaker, $1 million has been allocated to the start of a Bahamian Carnival and Mardi Gras. This will give the Bahamian music, art, and entertainers and other cultural forms additional opportunities to put on display for the world to see. This will create entrepreneurship in tourism and culture. And this is another way, Mr. Speaker, to create employment for many Bahamians with small and medium-sized businesses. Mr. Speaker, before I wrap up, I must commend the member for Angliston and the member for Seabreeze for the much-needed improvements that they have suggested for the Road Traffic Department, the department which I happen to head. Additionally, they have been doing a fine job in their ministry as a whole, despite what the naysayers say. Mr. Speaker, this is a budget with the Right Honourable Member from Centerville holding his hands firmly on the wheel, with a focus on improving, reiterate, holding his hands firmly on the wheel, despite what anyone may say, with a focus on improving the health of public finances, strengthening economic growth, creating jobs, and reducing crime. Mr. Speaker, this is a budget with a clear focus on securing the future for all Bahamians. Mr. Speaker, Nassau Village supports this budget. I thank you for your attention. May God bless you, and God bless the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I once again rise to express how favored I am to stand in this place to offer some remarks about a matter of great importance to the people of the Bahamas, namely the 2013-2014 budget. I am permitted to do this by the willingness of the the wonderful people of Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador to repose their confidence in me with my re-election to Parliament in May of last year. Further, a few years ago, the members of the Progressive Liberal Party elected me deputy leader with a commitment that I would espouse the core values of the party at all levels of my political activity. The Right Honourable Prime Minister honoured me with the appointment as Deputy Prime Minister and concurrently entrusted me with the responsibility with matters within the portfolio of the Ministry of Works and Urban Development. Yes. I am grateful to my constituents in once again empowering me to work in their interest and in the interest of all Bahamians as a member of this ancient and honourable Parliament. I'm also grateful to the Prime Minister for inviting me to serve the Bahamian people in his cabinet. Mr. Speaker, all my life I have sought to prepare myself as a means of permitting me to serve the state. Service at this level does represent sacrifice, but that sacrifice satisfies me that what we are doing and what I'm contributing to is for the better and the common good. Yes. When we campaigned to be elected to govern, our slate of candidates made commitments. Our party published those commitments in its Charter for Governance. Since the election, we have not been reticent in referring to our commitments in the Charter. We were serious in our commitments before the election, and we remain serious in our commitments as we serve the people in government. Our Prime Minister, in his communication, invited all of us to refer to our Charter to connect our commitments outlined therein to the budget allocations. With permission, I propose just to refer to some of these areas before I address matters peculiarly within the portfolio for which I have responsibility. And some of those commitments that connects to this budget are, and I'm pleased to highlight, is the $4 million investment in a new school of agriculture, marine sciences in Andros to help bring more focus to our agricultural and marine potential. The $10 million allocated to sports infrastructure throughout the Family Islands. This is in part to connect to the view espoused in our Charter of Governance that each child, wherever he or she may be in our archipelago, will have the same facilities as those who may be residing in New Providence or Grand Bahama, permitting them to excel in athletics and making sure that they understand that a healthy body also makes a healthy mind. But this is not the substance of this budget. It is instead a recognition where the government has placed its priority in continuing to the work of developing and building our young people and this nation. Mr. Speaker, the negative effects of criminal activity is most definitely the #1 issue facing us all. It was prior to the election and remains so today. Compared to our predecessors, we are focused on the issue of criminal activity and crime deterrent management as a prerequisite in this budget. And it connects to our budget, building on our investment from the previous year. We are increasing funding in the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Does that not point to priority? Increasing the allocation for expansion of police personnel. Does that not connect to what our priorities are? Providing $2 million for new vehicles to support our saturation control. Does that not speak or signal where our priority lies?
That's right.
Expanding the closed-circuit surveillance system throughout the island of Providence. Does that not signal
That's right.
some sense of priority? The safety of our citizens is of the utmost importance, and we continue to demonstrate that. And this underscores our unwavering commitment to our security forces. We continue to take definitive strategic action to ensure that a downward trend we have seen in the crime statistics the recent spurt of horrific murders and other criminal incidents. And, Mr. Speaker, we understand, and as I've said, criminal crime, the fear of crime, consumes us all. The truth of the matter is that it has been at such an unacceptably high level for so long
Right.
that the incremental, that's why I use the word trending downward. Right? I use the word trending downward, and the stats speaks to that. Right? But it's at such, it still has yet taken, it still has not dissipated the fear of crime. But the truth be said, it is trending down. But we're not sitting on our laurels or patting ourselves on the back about it. What we do know is that our initiatives are showing and proving to be having some success. And we just ask, stay tuned, and accept that, yes, there have been some downward trend. It is trending down, but yet we are still too high, and we accept that. But as I say, Mr. Speaker, just stay tuned. The budget allocation for the Ministry of National Security underscores our understanding on the needs of the country. The allocation for the ministry was increased 100% since the last budget submitted by the FNM, and 150% since the 2010-2011 budget. Mr. Speaker, critical focus has been brought to bear in the fight to create a society that understands its commitment to take care of one another. This government continues to fight to create a greater equality and an overriding sense of obligation to take care of the least amongst us. We have demonstrated this through increased funding supplied to the Department of Social Services, which supersedes spending by the previous government. When compared to the 2010 expenditure by the former government, it is a whopping 23% variance, accounting for a difference of almost $8 million. The Department of Social Services has continued to provide a hand up and not a handout to those of us who are in dire need. This social spending has frequently saved the most vulnerable of families. Speaker, a total of $10 million has been provided for urban renewal. This amount is allocated for the program to effect minor home repairs in inner city residential areas, and also to support the program's other activities. The minor house repairs project is designed with the objective of completing small-scale renovations to houses owned by occupants who have been identified by social service representatives as needing such assistance. The work of urban renewal and its centers on New Providence and Grand Bahama since its relaunch in 2012 has created positive impact on the lives of many persons through its mirrored schedule of services. Mr. Speaker, I don't recall which of the members opposite spoke of or making some suggestions about the $10 million that's been provided for the urban renewal small housing program. But I would like to, and I often heard the subtle criticisms of what is going on in Grand Bahama. And perhaps I have some slides. Mr. Forbes, I wonder if you could bring those. Let me just show, particularly the member from East Grand Bahama should see this, because and the member for Long Island, and the member from Long Island, and the member from my member from Central Grand Bahama, my classmate. You see, yeah, this is work's been going on in your constituency. Right? You have pictures of small houses, small house repairs. I'm not picking on Grand Bahama. I'm just showing you the effectiveness of the program. I put this down. All right? No, because the reason why I wanted to show that, because I wanted you all to see what the cook is doing. I want you all to see what the great cook is doing, the great work that she is doing. Michelle Reckley. You see, they are walking the streets, going into the homes and finding what's going on in these homes. And yes, the 10 million, and this is what it produces, right? Bringing people out of the mire and putting them and restoring their dignity and putting them in homes that's habitable. This is what's going on. I see the strange look in the face of the member from Central Grand Bahama. Perhaps, but I wish the member from East Grand Bahama was here, because he was talking that we should take this $10 million and go hire some people. Oh, you said it? Yeah. Oh, well, let me tell you what see the same. This wasn't 10 million. Oh, what's that?
Member, continue to address.
But let me tell you what 10 million could do. You see, right here, right here. This produced, right? You are not like the rest. Right, to date, the minor house repairs project in Grand Bahama has employed over 156 workers. Absolutely. How many? Over 156. And they're bringing relief to people. Right? So, for you not to appreciate that if $10 million is being spent for minor house repairs, that means jobs, and more jobs. We have to go back to class. Huh? No, you have to go back. I'll carry you. All right. So I just wanted members opposite in particular the naysayers of the urban renewal program, where we are touching lives, restoring the esteem and dignity of our people.
That's foolishness.
Right? And knowing at the same time, by bringing relief, we're not just bringing relief to the receivers of the good works, but we're also creating some jobs along the way. So, and for the information of the public, during the period, the 1st of July 2012 to the 11th of June 2013, the sum of some $5,183,671.95 was disbursed through the Urban Renewal Program. But what I wish to also advise the members opposite is that the structure of urban renewal is being examined with a view to establishing the necessary legal framework relative to the urban renewal's role in fundraising and its operations as a non-profit agency. We are in the process of drafting a bill which hopefully will be able to move in this fiscal period. Additionally, the Urban Renewal's headquarters will shortly be housed on the 6th floor of the Centerville House building at 2nd Terrace West, Collins Avenue. I take this opportunity now as well, Mr. Speaker, to thank the co-chairs, the Honorable Algernon Allen and the Honorable Cynthia Mother Pratt. For the stellar job that they are doing, which has only been done because they are inspired and committed to touching the lives of people and making someone's life a little better than it is when they met them. And I'd like to thank them and give them my heartfelt appreciation for the works that they are now doing and continue to do. Mr. Speaker, the mismanagement that was rampant during the New Providence Road Improvement Program is a thing of the past. In the final stages of the project coming to an end, we can turn our attention to fixing other parts of our infrastructure, which for too long have gone unattended. We will see the completion of the Marshall International Airport at a further expenditure of $1.8 billion, expansion of Family Island airports and runways, completion of repairs to Government House and expenditures of Government House, refocus on Bahamas, construction of sporting facilities, as was mentioned before, small home repairs and urban renewal development projects, as mentioned earlier again. And again, I emphasize the small house repairs and the urban renewal budget allocation will not only improve the quality of life of the program's beneficiaries, but will directly create a number of new jobs to those most in need and assist in spurring the construction sector, in addition to our revitalization of the government's housing program. Of course, Mr. Speaker, with the announcement of the $60 million in new investment in the government's home ownership program, it is clear that we are committed to the dream of all Bahamians owning a home of their own. Yeah. Our revitalization of this program is a clear indication that economic empowerment and social justice continue to be among the core values that define the Progressive Liberal Party and its approach to governance. The difference in approach could not be more apparent than in the side-by-side comparison between what the FNM provided the Ministry of Housing in its last budget and the 127 increase which the PLP has provided the Ministry of Housing and Environment in this budget. We are committed to making good on the promises made, not just 1 year ago, but those of 40 years and even 60 years ago, Mr. Speaker, because we now carry that baton. The government remains committed to helping struggling families to save their homes under our mortgage relief program. But we recognize that the program is just that it is, a mortgage relief program. It is just that, relief. The true long-term prescription is providing redress in job creation. And job creation is what we will do. Mr. Speaker, there's been a need to reorient the focus of the Department of Works from that of recent years. Everyone knows that with the mega-dollar projects of the New Providence Road project and the 4-lane JFK Drive redevelopment totaling hundreds of millions of dollars in contract prices and years in construction processes, projects of a few $100,000 seem like small change. Well, we must always remember that the average family pays to the government in taxes up to approximately $10,000 of their income every year. Therefore, when we agree to pay $1 million for a project, that represents the tax dollars of 100 families for an entire year. We owe it to them to manage the expenditure of each and every dollar, respecting that we are spending their hard-earned money and are spending it for their benefit. Yes, Mr. Speaker, I know that this means adjusting the mindset of many, but I consider that nothing less will do. It is with this reality we change from having half of the ministry's capital budget spent on just 2 projects and leaving so many very necessary wood unattended and experiencing further deterioration.
Terrible.
So, Mr. Speaker, beginning with this cycle, we will seek to make buildings the government has bought usable. We will complete roadworks. We will complete roadworks in Cat Island, North Andros, San Salvador, and Acton. We will build the North Abaco Port. We will build and fix the Fishing Hole Road Bridge in Grand Bahamas. And we will effect repairs at airports like Deadman's Key, Long Island, Treasure Key, Abaco, Cat Island, and Maguana, and Exuma. The 2013-2014 budget, Mr. Speaker, communication facilitates the advancement of new capital work initiatives that have been identified as areas of priority, as well as the further advancement of specific ongoing projects. It is important to note that the new capital works initiatives mentioned in the budget communication are projects that are predominantly earmarked for family island districts, where investment in maintenance and construction of public infrastructure has not kept pace with the rate of deterioration of public infrastructure and demographic changes in many of these communities over many, many years. As I would have said in this space before, over the last 3 to 4 years, 5 years even, the infrastructure in the family islands has been totally neglected. Totally neglected in the family islands. All the capital funds are spent on the New Providence Road project, the Queen Elizabeth facilities, and the airport gateway. And so you would have heard the minister, when we talk about capital investments in the family islands, you heard the Minister of Education speak about the $5.5 million that's been allocated for the construction of new primary and secondary schools in Inagua, San Salvador, Eleuthera, and Andros. Right, you would have heard the Minister of Health speaks of the construction of many hospitals in South Eleuthera and Cat Island. And of course, you would have heard of the $10 million I spoke of earlier for the construction of multi-purpose sporting facilities in the family islands. These projects will undoubtedly contribute significantly to the local economies of these islands and will provide residents who are also taxpayers with facilities that will more adequately meet their needs. Mr. Speaker, with specific reference to the budget of the Ministry of Works and Urban Development, let me just say, as I started to mention, for the past 3 years, I repeat it, for the past 3 years, a significant portion, more than 50% of my ministry's capital budget, which includes asset maintenance, was expended on the New Providence Road Improvement Project, the Airport Gateway Project, and the Queen Elizabeth Sporting Center facilities. In moving forward, after completion of the mentioned major projects, we would wish to reduce the level of underinvestment in asset maintenance throughout the country, specifically the Family Islands, which also has the potential to reduce costs in the long term. You know, it's like stitch in time, save nine. The capital budget allocation of my ministry will assist in bringing the mentioned major projects to conclusion here in New Providence. Additionally, funding is provided for general road construction repair on New Providence in the amount of $3.5 million, and $10 million for general road construction repair in the Family Islands. The latter total will facilitate the roadworks, as mentioned before, in Cat Island, Exuma, North Andros, Acklands, and San Salvador. Mr. Speaker, I turn to the Department of Physical Planning. The Department of Physical Planning will move to more spacious accommodation in the upcoming budget year, as its current location on the ground floor of the ministry's JFK building is too small to facilitate all of the functions of that department. In addition, its relocation, the department plans beginning in the new budget year will include recruitment of additional technical staff, training and retraining, implementation of a more simplified planning system, preparation of new zoning orders to facilitate redevelopment of the downtown area, and protection of the environmentally and historically significant areas, preparation of new sign regulations which are to be added to the Planning and Subdivision Act, implementation of a new fee structure for planning applications, and publication of the department's first annual report. The current expenditure allocation for the Department of Physical Planning is now $1.4 million. With further references to the Department of Physical Planning, its work is closely tied to that of the Department of Public Works and the Building Control section. That tie relates to building permits and other building planning and other planning activities. It is to be noted, Mr. Speaker, that in the 2012 World Bank's Ease of Doing Business survey, the Bahamas was ranked 79th out of 183 countries globally. And we were 7 out of 7 countries regionally relative to obtaining all necessary approvals for a construction permit. While some aspects of the time required in completing this process are justified, efforts are ongoing on the part of all of these departments to reasonably reduce the turnaround time in processing building construction applications. To this end, during February 2013, to this end, during February of this year, representatives from these departments, along with representatives from the Department of Environmental Health Services and the Department of Information Technology, traveled to Florida for a demonstration of the concurrent plan processing system utilized by the Dade County Building Department. This system facilitates the viewing and cross-referencing of documentation, example, architectural plans, in electronic format by all relevant departments simultaneously, resulting in reduced processing time. In the case of residential construction, Dade County is able, through its technology, to complete plan review within 1 week. This is in stark contrast to our current plan review procedures, where the documents, paper, must be sequentially relayed from one location or department to another. And that's where, and it eats up time. The report on this proposed system will be reviewed by Cabinet shortly, and hopefully we will be able to introduce this concurrent plan processing system to be able to reduce the time and improve the effectiveness and efficiency of these departments. In other efforts to enhance the efficiency through technology, the Ministry, along with the Department of Public Works, is in the process of upgrading the existing computer network. This project commenced last week and is expected to enhance connectivity and ensure reliability of the system. An additional initiative to enhance efficiency that has been approved and will be implemented during the 2013-2014 budget is the use of AccuStar, which is an electronic timesheet attendance system. This system is already in use at some government agencies and will assist in the monitoring and management of employee attendance and employee project assignment records. As with this department, Mr. Speaker, we plan to focus, and every department in the ministry, we plan to focus, Mr. Speaker, to find the means to improve efficiency and service to the public. We have a responsibility to protect the integrity of all building processes, public and private. But there are better ways to achieve this than we have traditionally utilized. To this end, we will find the means to make our authority responsive to the needs of the public and professions who interact with the ministry. We are further committed to developing the institutional information on all our physical assets so that the improved planning function in the Prime Minister's office, announced by the Minister of State for Investments, will have available a complete inventory of all government infrastructure. That is to say, where roads, docks, airstrips, bridges, buildings, and their like are, and their condition. So, Mr. Speaker, a lot of these initiatives are born out because we have, in this budget, addressed some of the long-standing issues of fees that attend to those areas that fall under my ministry. For example, under the explosive regulations, where fees have gone up for permit to import and possess explosives to $5, explosive magazine to get a license to have an explosive magazine, that's gone up from $100 to $150, a blasting license from $2 to $5, license for a subsidiary magazine for explosives, that's gone up from $25 to $50. And of course, we have also caused fees to be raised in the buildings regulations, and again, to make it more current and more cost, where it could relate. Services, fees are fixed to relate to the level of service that's being provided. For example, the buildings regulation fees were in place from 1988 and that's not changed. The explosive fees have been in place from 1970 and not changed. The garage licensing fees, which will be going up, was not changed from 1988. The liquefied petroleum gas fees for dealers, sub-dealers, installers, etc., were not changed from 1988. and the time for a review of these fees, to bring it to reflect the level of services that's being provided for the grant of these licenses, inspections, etc., we find that these fees are reasonable at this time. And they will be in place and in effect immediately. Of course, Mr. Speaker, we are, as I said, we are ensuring. We know that we are adding fees, which we think are reasonable for the services being offered by the various departments. But at the same time, we hear the cries of the general public that we are not as effective as we ought to be. So concurrently with the raising of fees, we are providing introducing initiatives to ensure that the ministry is more responsive to the general public and its customers. Speaker, I now turn to the Water and Sewage Corporation. Mr. Speaker, while I did promise, and there are some further works in Abaco that I ought to mention, as I did speak to the member from South Abaco. I indicated that we will not just look at it, but we will repair the road in Hopetown that leads from the settlement to the north end, which I think is, there's some deep holes, I'm understanding, where water is settling up to almost 2 feet. We'll address that, and hopefully we'll get the scope of it, and you'll have it back to me very soon. So we'll address that in very short order, member from South Abaco. South Abaco. While operating revenues of the Water and Sewage Corporation are projected to remain steady at $42 million, revenue collection remains a challenge, as indicated in my mid-year budget contribution. The total subsidy for 2012-2013 was $29.7 million, which is about $4.9 million reduction over the previous year's subvention of $34.6 million. It should be noted that 92%, or $27.3 million of the subsidy has been allocated to pay for desalinated water purchases, and the remainder is for debt service. The reduction of $4.9 million in cash subvention has contributed to over $10 million currently owed to Water and Sewage's largest supply of desalinated water, along with smaller amounts owed to various other suppliers of goods and services. The corporation has presented a package of cost containment and revenue enhancement measures to the government for its consideration, and is relying considerably on the successful and timely implementation of the IDB loan initiatives. A subvention in the amount of $20 million is allocated for the 2013-2014 budget, and hopefully this will be able to suffice for that year. During the past fiscal year, Water and Sewage has executed several projects of significance. These include replacement of approximately 50,000 feet of pipe work in New Providence at a cost of nearly $1.5 million to primarily address water quality as to red water and service low pressure challenges. Furthermore, high efficiency pumps, motors were installed at major New Providence water pumping stations as part of an energy efficiency initiative, and that has again contributed to aiding the cost of producing water. In an effort to protect the environment and groundwater resources, while also achieving increased efficiency in water consumption, a $10 million loan was secured from the National Insurance Board for construction of the wastewater treatment plant at Gladstone Road. To this end, a $7.5 million contract was awarded to a Bahamian joint venture company to design and build a 1 million imperial gallons per day wastewater treatment plant. The plant is expected to be completed in early 2014 and will service Bahamas and neighboring subdivisions. On Monday, the 10th of June, relevant agreements between Water and Sewage and Bahamas were signed for potable water supply to the development, as well as wastewater receipt, treatment, and return for reuse to that development in specified quantities. We expect that in the long term, this wastewater treatment plant will also facilitate enhancement of the levels of revenue intake by the corporation. With reference to the IDB loan agreement, the non-revenue water contractor, Maya Bahamas Limited, completed studies and commenced a pilot project. The execution phase of the contract commenced during January 2013 with targeted reduction of 0.5 MIGD, that's the water, gallons, by December 2013. Maya, in conjunction with Water and Sewage and the Ministry of Education, also recently completed a pilot water conservation awareness program at Oaksfield Primary School. This program was comprised of student education on the various means to achieve water efficiency, along with the upgrading of plumbing fixtures at the school to enhance water conservation. It is reported that this program has resulted already in a 20% campus-wide reduction in water consumption. A procurement exercise commenced for public relations activity to improve the corporation's relationships with the public and to strengthen efforts in customer service recovery and retention is undergoing. It's out for bid now, and hopefully that PR exercise will start very soon. The corporation will also shortly launch a procurement exercise to address regulatory reform of the sector, both from an economic standpoint, where IRCA is to assume control of that sector, and from an environmental standpoint, where this is intended to be vested in the Ministry of Environment. An additional initiative that is pending is the award of a contract for wastewater consultant to prepare a master plan for New Providence and to assess the condition of existing sewer infrastructure. Subsequent to this exercise, procurement will begin for over $40 million of sewage infrastructure work on New Providence. Mr. Speaker, you know, we talk about potable water. And again, sometimes we have to remind ourselves so that we can show the difference in how we treat our people. Because I don't think it could be doubted that the availability of safe potable water is an absolute necessity of life. The stark reality is that in many of our family island communities, there is a larger proportion of elderly than in either New Providence or Grand Bahama. I raise that because once we recognize that the availability of safe potable water is an absolute necessity of life, right, we have to come to appreciate or understand why is it that when the FNM, during the FNM administration, they were so neglectful of those in the family islands. You know, I'm grateful to Bradley Roberts, who sat in my chair and who agreed to serve as chairman for the Water and Sewage Corporation. That was done specifically because there was a national water and wastewater framework that was created and developed by the previous administration whilst he was the minister. And so it was fortuitous, and for that I'm appreciative of him to to have taken that post, because then the PLP government remained focused on their efforts to bring reliable potable water to all communities of citizens throughout our country, and we intend to pay the same focused attention during this term. You know, so because between 2000 and 2007, 2002, 2007, while Mr. Roberts was minister, the PLP government developed, as I indicated, a national water and wastewater framework. They challenged the then board, management, and staff of the corporation to become innovative in getting quality water supplies throughout the Bahamas. During this period, water plants were built in Abaco, Bimini, Eleuthera, Exuma, Inagua, Long Island, Ragged Island, and San Salvador. New transmission mains were commissioned in Exuma and San Salvador. Contracts were let to replace water mains and construct storage tanks in a number of locations in Eleuthera. A number of projects in Abaco included new mains and distribution systems, and a reverse osmosis plant for Greentail Key was let. All right. That was entered into. An agreement was made to put a reverse osmosis plant in Greentail Key. No. You know that? Huh? It wasn't. I know you had nothing to do with a lot of things. You sat in the chair. You're right. You had nothing to do with it, but I can tell you what happened to it then. Mr. Speaker, sorry for our class reunion, yes. Right? You know, for example, you know, the PLP government in 2007 had committed to put in a water system in South Andros. In fact, when the African government came into power, when they were elected in 2007, they agreed to proceed with the same plan. But very shortly afterward, they canceled it. So they'll get back to it. And they still haven't, they never got back to that. All right? All we can do is, huh? So yeah, that's on the list. All right? So let me tell you what happened to the reverse osmosis plant for Greater Key. It was canceled.
Regular.
Huh?
Regular. It ain't going forward.
But, Mr. Speaker, as I said, you know, I told the member, he sat in the chair. He sat in the chair, but you know.
Member rises on the point of order. The chair recognizes the member for Central Grand Bahama.
The member for Rumpke, Cat Islands, and Salvador needs to check the files.
Yeah.
He should be aware that between 2008 and 2012, water and sewage did not come under the Ministry of Public Works and Transport.
Thank you, honourable member. Member for Cat Island, Rumpke, and San Salvador.
I don't blame you, sir. And if you think I'm blaming you, Mr. Speaker, I don't blame him. I say that that's collective responsibility, but if he washes his hands of it. No, it was, let me tell you what happened. The F&M canceled the reverse osmosis plan for Greater Key in favor of an underwater pipeline, which is still not yet completed. That's what happened. That's what happened. It's still floating. A reverse osmosis plant was scheduled for Williamstown. Right? By us. And that was cancelled by the F&M. This plant is now installed, and very shortly Williamstown will have fresh, clean water from this new system. See, somebody asked about Long Island. Lines laid many years ago by the PLP for Deadman Ski, Long Island, and Inagua have had to be refurbished at additional cost to make the lines ready for use. But y'all did nothing. Right? Let me tell you what happened. And for the week or so before the elections, they sign a contract.
Again?
Yeah, another contract. Say, let's put this water in Long Island now. Right? I remember that one. Right, they signed it. Right? And you know, one day I'll tell the story about that. I ain't going to tell the story about that one yet. I can hold that one back. But Long Island, water will be coming.
Bring the Rowdy Boys back, though.
Right?
Gotta keep some.
Suffice it to say that even though the FM could not get around to extending the water mains from Grays to Salt Pond in Long Island, the PLP will complete the project and ensure that Salt Pond citizens have access to good, clean, fresh water on a dependable basis at long last. We will deliver, we will fulfill throughout the length and breadth of our island because we understand the necessity of water. Mr. Speaker,
I get an F on water.
the Straw Market Authority is a work in progress. In the past year, the authority spent $1.7 million, including $107,000 in capital works. They achieved $1.15 million in revenue from an accelerated effort to collect arrears from stallholders and attempting to keep their rents current. The government provided a subsidy of $675,000 in the last cycle and plans a subsidy of $400,000 in this new budget. They have achieved improvement in the physical structure and continue to work on making their various locations comfortable for vendors to work and user-friendly for its patrons. Mr. Speaker, we have a great deal of discussion and conversation relative to BEC, Bahamas Electricity Corporation, in the past year. And I'm grateful to my chairman, who has been assiduous, relentless, and committed to ensuring that we fulfill our promise to each and every Bahamian, including those who are working at BEC, right, to bring relief from this elephant that hangs on our neck, the cost of electricity. And the discussion has been trying and vexing because, simply put, the cost of electricity has been too high for too long. The board and management of the corporation have been reviewing every single aspect of the corporation to see where efficiencies could be achieved and where costs could be lowered. The government has made a decision to remove the excise tax on fuel imports to help in a very direct way to provide a means for BEC to lower its charges to consumers. The government is actively reviewing more than 60 proposals for the provision of renewable energy with the potential to lower the cost of energy to BEC even further. The Parliamentary Secretary in the Ministry of Works, a member for Bamboo Town and Greenwich Wells, is co-chairing the task force reviewing all of these submissions. We are hopeful that they will find a amount of proposals, projects, which can come on stream in relatively short order and help reduce again the cost of electricity to our consumers. Total revenue was reported as being down for BEC as a result of a reduction in units billed by some 3% from last year. The decrease in revenue accounts for a $3.7 million decrease in budgeted gross profit. Total operating expenses are reported as being 4% over the prior year, but 2.3% under budget, despite a $7 million increase in bad debt expense to date. In this regard, the corporation is attempting to reduce its expenses. During this budget year, BC was able to undertake and complete several major projects at various locations, all of which designed to bring efficiency and to lower the cost of electricity. Some of those initiatives or projects include the Blue Hills Power Station, where a 24 megawatts combustion turbine is being installed, and commercial power should be available for transmission from this equipment by September 2013. The Clifton Pier Station, where installation of a waste heat boiler is essentially complete, which will enhance operations at Clifton Pier. And I'm pleased to note that today I received a memo from the chairman of BEC, which is very encouraging. That speaks to what has happened at Clifton Pier, and I'll just read some excerpts from what he's told me. I take this opportunity to advise with regards to the above caption, which is Clifton Pier Station Update and Summer Preparedness. As you're aware, upon its appointment, this board conducted a review of the corporation's operations and finances, which concluded that the Clifton Pier Power Plant was a key component to the organization's success in both of these areas. The board embarked, therefore, upon an exercise to bolster the plant, equipment, and operations in an effort to improve the output, availability, and reliability at this facility. These efforts included the conducting of major overhauls on the Station B, slow-speed diesels, a comprehensive auxiliary equipment refurbishment exercise, the installation of an additional waste heat boiler, and a general plant housekeeping cleanup and remediation that remains ongoing. He also points out to me that the Clifton Pier Power Plant is the more economically beneficial production plant in the New Providence generation mix. The operational target is to produce 60% of the New Providence power demand from Clifton Pier and 40% from Blue Hills Power Plant. However, due to years of neglect by the former administration's decision to forego maintenance from 2009 to 2011, the target was not realized at tremendous expense to the consumers. My chairman is correcting that. That's right. That has been corrected. I will not read the whole memorandum to me. Suffice it to say that the target of the board was to achieve a sustainable 120 megawatts output from Clifton Pier, which will enable the corporation to accomplish a 6.88% reduction in year-over-year cost compared to last summer. And they have achieved 130 megawatts to date. So we should have a cool summer. The expectation. It's exceeded the expectation. And we have saved about $8 million. That's right. And we saved it because the fuel costs of the plant being in the condition that they met it after the neglect, we were paying fuel costs in the sum of some $115,789,000 per year. With what they have done since they were there, we expect that to drop by at least $8 million and further drop as their work continues.
good.
Speaker, go to Bahamas here. Oh, there's some other things BC did. Let's talk about that. At the headquarters, they repaired and expanded the parking lot, and that is near completion. In the Marsh Harbor substation, where civil works are completed, and installation of the switchgear and transformers are in progress, with the midsummer as the expected date of completion. In Hatchet Bay, the fuel storage facility, where a 500,000 gallon fuel storage tank and fuel delivery pipeline are essentially complete, and the fuel tank is already in use. Speaker, Bahamas Air Holdings continues to suffer from high labor costs, an aging fleet, escalating fuel costs, and a commitment to unprofitable domestic routes. As with each budget for a number of years, this year, $20 million is budgeted to support Bahamas Air's operation. Its circumstances have been further compounded by competition from smaller local private carriers providing services to domestic routes and ongoing downward pressure on airfares in the Florida market due to competition by low-fare international carriers. Mr. Speaker, subsequent to the general elections in May 2012, it was discovered that industrial agreements between Bahamas Air and associated trade unions had expired for over 3 years. For 3 years, I think there are 4 union contracts that have expired. That's right. And guess what? And employees were not paid their annual increments to which they were entitled. And of course, they reminded me that the last time they had gotten any increment was when the PLP was in government again. So again we came and we responded to these circumstances. And in keeping with this government's campaign, promise of looking out for our people first, we moved very quickly and swiftly to at least approve and provide the funding necessary to satisfy the increment obligation. And this we did. Earlier, a couple months ago, the government agreed to purchase a third 120-seat Boeing 737 jet aircraft to permit an improvement in service and efficiency and to fill the gaps of some of the carriers that have pulled out or scaled back their traffic between Florida and the Bahamas and New Providence. The board and management of Bahamas Air are presently reviewing adjustments to the business model as a means of providing options which would result in greater service to the people as a substantial cost saving over the existing expensive approach. It is anticipated that Bahamas Air and the government will, in very short order, craft the new business model that will be for the benefit of all. Mr. Speaker, the Bahamas is a better place because of those hundreds and even thousands of positive thinkers who gave of themselves over the centuries in service to their fellow Bahamians. From time to time, we reflect on many of these when we have appropriate anniversary celebrations. For instance, when we commemorate Emancipation Day, we call on the names of heroic fighters against injustice, like Pompey in Exuma,
Okay.
Black Kate in Crocodile in Acklands.
Okay.
Well, I can't leave out Black Dick.
No, you can't. No, you can't.
Or Cat Allen, 4 Hour Cat Allen.
There we go. There we go. DD.
Of course, there's always also Alec of San Salvador.
Yes, sir.
Alec, yes. Of San Salvador. All of these heroes of the past had struck a blow against injustices. Yeah, Rumkey had Milo Butler. Milo Butler came from. Right? When we consider social changes in the 100 years from the mid-19th century through the mid-20th century, we only have to reflect on the names of public schools in New Providence to be reminded of heroes of that era. Names like Messrs. Dillett, Glover, Sawyer, Walker, as well as Eneas, Tynes, Young, Roberts, Adley, Reeves. These heroes, joined by leaders of the suffragette movement, as well as the organized political structure, names like Johnston, Lockhart, and Ingram, Taylor, Stevenson, Cartwright, and Butler, among so many others. When we come to this year's celebration of our 40th anniversary, we think of Messrs. Penling and Hannah. This litany clearly confirms that in all our history, we've been blessed with men and women who rose to the occasion and led our people through the trials and difficulties of the times. This era is no different. This budget can be best categorized as a blueprint for fiscal responsibility. And after a review of the budget documents, it is clear to the objective thinker that the progressive Liberal Party has a firm sense of control and a real grip on reality when it comes to managing the fiscal affairs of this nation. Mr. Speaker, there's a concept that says, show me a government's budget and I'll show you government's priorities. We claim that mantra for this budget, and I have pointed out when I started the connection between our commitments set out in our Charter for Governance and how it connects with heads of items in the budget. Yes, Mr. Speaker, as I said, those brave men and women through our history, right, pulled us through the difficult times. And this era is no different. We will pull through this difficult time.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many. The Chair recognized the Honorable Member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to thank you. Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to speak to what is perhaps the single most important piece of legislative work we do in the course of any fiscal year, and that is the putting in place of the necessary finances to ensure that we could in fact run the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, allow me to reflect, as my colleague, the member for Cat Island, just did, on the outstanding work done by those persons who came before, who made it possible for us to stand where we do today, who gave us the foundation, who made us who we are. Mr. Speaker, when I consider the work done by men and women in the West Grand Bahama Bimini constituents, I could not but celebrate their wonderful lives. The fact that many who had very little gave all that they did have. And it came from their soul, it came from their hearts, Mr. Speaker, because one day they saw us having a country that we could all be so proud of. They fought, and they fought hard. And Mr. Speaker, it is the right time for us to stop and to reflect on the work done by those men and women, Mr. Speaker, because we're headed to July 10th. And the importance for all of us, Mr. Speaker, is to remember in all of our constituencies, there were men and women who made it possible. They sacrificed. They gave their blood, their sweat, their tears to make a difference. And Mr. Speaker, when I think of it, and I remember men like Preacher Hall, and I think of Reverend Ralph Russell, still alive today, Mr. Speaker. When I think of John N.T. Roll, another reverend, another great gentleman. When I think of men who, in the West Grand Bahama constituency, like Hilton Boleg and Artis Neely, and when I think of Cedro Williams, who's now passed on, men who gave everything and still do, Mr. Speaker, once they have it. When I think of Bertram Black, another great man, or Lewis McDonald, or individuals who made a difference and still do. What about Bert Williams? He was called the General. Persons who did all they could, Simeon Brown Sr., and of course his lovely wife. When we think about Senator Austin Grant and his wife Ann, all those persons, Mr. Speaker, who walked up and down to ensure that men like Warren J. Lavarity would be elected, men like Henry Bowen would be elected, Simeon Brown would be elected, men who all made great contributions. Moses Hall stood in this place, Mr. Speaker. Simeon Brown Jr. stood in this place, Mr. Speaker. They were here because of the sacrifices. David Wallace came and represented the Free National Movement, but the people of the West Grand Bahama constituency, Mr. Speaker. And now I have the opportunity. But in Bimini, we had Frank Roll and we had George Weish, all who came to give what they could for our constituency, Mr. Speaker. And how could we forget at this time in history, the work that they did for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas? Mr. Speaker, I'm forever grateful. And that is why when I look to my people in my constituency and I see the difficulties they face today, I represent them, Mr. Speaker. I stand for them because they have given me the opportunity to stand for them and to represent them in this place of honor. And Mr. Speaker, what is even more significant is the fact that they have suffered. They have had difficult times, but through it all, they remained faithful. Through it all, they stood strong, and they stand strong, Mr. Speaker. And through it all, when you ask them to stand with you, they do. And they do so, many not looking for anything except believing in the overarching philosophy of the Progressive Liberal Party. And that is that we would always feed the poor. We would heal the sick. We would guide the youth. And we'll bring peace to every heart. That's what we do, Mr. Speaker. And when we think of this budget and what it contains, we recognize, Mr. Speaker, all that's in it represents all that we stand for. In fact, sir, I should like to go on record as saying that our leader has brought us back to our base. Our leader has brought us back to the things we believe in, Mr. Speaker. And he's brought us back at a very difficult time. He pushed aside the critics. He let no one push him. He said, this is the envelope I should push across the table because the buck stops with me. I am responsible. And because he is, Mr. Speaker, he says we'll manage our country better. And if it means we take cuts, we take cuts. If it means we cut back in certain areas, but what we will not compromise is the need to protect our nation. What we will not compromise is the need to educate our people. What we will not compromise is the need to ensure that every single Bahamian gets health care, Mr. Speaker. That's what our leader has done. So the brilliance of his speech, the brilliance of this document that he's presented to this Parliament, you won't see it if you listen to some. But if you read it carefully, if you understand all that is said, and Sir Lyndon Pitman always told me, you must read behind the lines, on top of the lines, at the bottom of the lines. because that is where the message is, Mr. Speaker. The message is because it is to take care of all the people of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And Mr. Speaker, at this time in our history, as we get ready to celebrate the 40th anniversary of our independence, Mr. Speaker, I think it's important for us to reflect on the important words of our Constitution, particularly our Constitution's preamble, Mr. Speaker, which is a solemn pledge that we must all make, because that is what guides us in this place. The Constitution, Mr. Speaker, and in it, you would see how our leaders believed in God. They understood the power of God, and they referred to our God. They knew where our strength comes from our God, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to just reflect on it for a moment, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it says, whereas 481 years ago, the rediscovery of the family of islands, rocks and keys, listen to this, Mr. Speaker, heralded the rebirth of the new world, not just the Bahamas, you know, the new world, Mr. Speaker, the new world. And whereas the people of this family of islands, recognizing that the preservation of their freedom will be guaranteed by a national commitment to self-discipline, industry, loyalty, unity, and an abiding respect for Christian values and the rule of law. Now know ye therefore, we the inheritors of and successors to this family of islands, recognizing, Mr. Speaker, the supremacy of God and the believing in the fundamental rights and freedoms of the individual, do hereby proclaim in solemn praise the establishment of a free and democratic sovereign nation founded on spiritual values, and in which no man, woman, or child shall ever be slave or bondsman to anyone, or their labor exploited, or their lives frustrated by deprivation, and do hereby provide these articles for the indivisible unity and creation under God of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that is why it is no secret. If we listen to even our national anthem, you hear, may the road you trod lead unto your God, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, what's even more, if you go to the Bible and you look up Leviticus 23:27, you know what you'd find? That on the 10th day of the 7th month shall be the Day of Atonement. Look it up, Mr. Speaker. What were they telling us? 10th day of the 7th, what is that? July 10th. That's our Independence Day. That's in the Bible, Mr. Speaker. Leviticus 23:27. You look it up.
You don't believe it?
That's where it is, Mr. Speaker. Whether we accept it or not, that is the reality of our country. And if we go one step further, Mr. Speaker, it's our 40th anniversary soon to come. And you go to Deuteronomy chapter number 1, you'd find, Mr. Speaker, it says what Moses told the children. It's time to come out of the mountains and go where? Go to possess your land, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what do you think we're doing in this country? Think about it. Think about what our leaders were doing. They were guiding us from day one. And we may have ignored it all. But now it's time for us to appreciate what the words in our Constitution say, what the words in our national anthem say, what it is connected to the July 10th. And in this 40th anniversary, the importance of where we're going. We're going to our land to possess what belongs to us, Mr. Speaker, because we have traveled the rough side of the mountain. It's time now for us to go and proclaim and to take ownership of this land, Mr. Speaker, that we call the Bahamas. This is our land, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that's why I am so happy today to be here, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to be a part of this team. I'm happy that at this time in history, I can stand before this Parliament and I can speak in this place. Because there was a time when we couldn't, Mr. Speaker, but yes, we can. And I'm so very pleased that we can. And, Mr. Speaker, young men and young women in this country need to be brought into what we're trying to do. We cannot have a parliament where we leave the young men and young women out. And it's one thing to run young men and young women for offices in politics, but they must be involved, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, just let me, as I introduce this piece of my speech, to say this. I want to congratulate you. Before you came to this place, you had a program where you mentored young men. You mentored young men, Mr. Speaker, and you were doing something what is so absent in our country today. And then we talk about crime. Mr. Speaker, I want to refer to an article and to a study that I've been taking part in. And it appears today, Mr. Speaker, in the Ebony magazine, but they do have an article that's called The War Within, Mr. Speaker, and it talks about the plight of the young black male in America. And when you read the information, Mr. Speaker, you'd wonder whether they're talking about the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And you know, someone, I think it was my member of Parliament for Montague, my member said in this place last week, he said, are we looking at the root causes? We're talking about crime. And it is true. Every time I hear about crime, I hear about the arrest. I hear about the judicial system. But are we seeking to arrest the minds of those individuals before they are led to committing a crime? That's where the real problem is, Mr. Speaker. And that is why I want to refer to this, Mr. Speaker, and just for us to pay attention to some of the studies that are being done that might give us an insight as to what's happening in our country, might cause us to have a greater appreciation to the dilemma as to why our men turn to gangs, why our men turn away from families, why our young men turn to crime, Mr. Speaker. And it's done by several of the intellects of America, and it's done because they too face a serious problem. And I wish to refer to it, Mr. Speaker, and I take ownership of whatever I refer to. It says, research reveals that black boys and girls raised in a household without their father's presence are at a dramatically greater risk of drug and alcohol abuse, mental illness, suicide, poor educational performance, teens pregnancy, and being ensnared in the criminal justice system. Think about it, Mr. Speaker. Think about where we are. Listen to what Delano Mandera at Northwestern University says. He says, many African-American mothers, when you really press them on it, view their sons as mildly retarded girls. Boys are rarely as advanced as girls from early on. They can catch up eventually given the right home environment and right parenting, but it's very rare that a 5-year-old boy is going to be cognitively at the level of a 5-year-old girl. We just don't come out like that. It takes a little more time with us. But moms don't think in those terms. What they see is that he can do what his sisters could at 5. He can hold a pencil at 2, like they did, or he can't start writing the letters as quickly. That's when the low expectations start to kick in. It just gets worse as he grows and he starts having difficulty relating to the female teachers in schools, Mr. Speaker, as he pulls away from mom and stops talking to her. Sometimes most boys do when adolescence approaches. Soon everything he does or doesn't do and every decision he makes becomes a problem. Mr. Speaker, he says this is when father's absence is especially harmful. So the development of the boys becomes a problem as a father's perspective is not given in the home, Mr. Speaker. He said boys raised in homes without their fathers tend to be more emotionally fragile, not having been strengthened by the unflinching demands fathers often make of their sons and not by having the men to serve as role models of appropriate male behavior. Mothers are keenly aware, and sometimes they say they do not get the love that the mothers would give children or the young child. Howard Stevenson, a clinical psychologist and professor at the University of Pennsylvania, says this: the absence of positive black men in their lives allows our boys to develop what he calls hyper-masculine models of male black manhood, models that surround them on the streets and in popular culture, particularly in rap music. These are one-dimensional caricatures built around physicality, sexuality, and street respect, models that likely are not going to help boys succeed in school and beyond. They wind up constantly trying to prove their manhood, which causes a lot of hurt and pain. They also are quick to perceive challenge to their manhood, quick to feel like they're being disrespected. You can't keep up with that image, he says, so it becomes a very insecure masculinity. He goes on, the bravado is protective up to a point, but it can get in the way when you're with your partner or girlfriend, in sexual situations, or even with your homeboys. It creates an incredible amount of space to fail because no one can keep that up. And then it says, Mr. Speaker, we have to fix these systems to enhance the black boys when they're trying to even become fathers. Because, Mr. Speaker, it says, otherwise they retreat back into their comfort zones. And what is their comfort zones? Their comfort zone is into a subculture, back into the gang, where they feel comfortable, Mr. Speaker, and where they feel loved. Mr. Speaker, you wonder if they have been looking at our society as well. Because I have a view that you are looking at a lot of young boys and young men committing crime. But are they men? They're boys. Well, who's talking to them? Who's meeting with them? They're boys. They aren't men. We're men. We've had experiences. We've had some mentors telling us what to do. And we've been wrong on occasions too. And we've had to be corrected, Mr. Speaker. But who is talking to the young boy who has the gun in his hand, or who has access, who believes that he must show his masculinity, or as they say, hypermasculinity? Who's talking to them? Mr. Speaker, your experience, and you know, I believe well, sir, that your chair could do well to help us in this mentoring program, sir, with respect. Because I know your program, when you were not in this place, was very effective because you talked to young men. You had them out there. You were talking as a mentor, as a leader. That's what they need. Because, Mr. Speaker, unlike many of my colleagues in here, I sat in Her Majesty's prison for 4 days. And I spoke to some of them, Mr. Speaker, and when you listen to their stories and you see the notes that they sent me, you recognize, Mr. Speaker, that some of them are just lost. They don't know where they are. And yes, they're trying to appease their friends. They're trying to appease their girlfriends. They're trying to have money. They're trying to do things, Mr. Speaker, and so they take some turns they should not take. And are we to say that we've lost them? Are we to say that we have a lost generation? Are we to say that our young black male has no contribution to make? Mr. Speaker, let's be honest. What bothers me in our society is the lack of honesty. Because we do know we have a problem with the black male, but let's ask ourselves a question. Why is it that the white young male is never in trouble? Why is it? They in this country too, you know. They drink liquor too, you know. They smoke some stuff too, you know. They get in some bad things too, you know. But what's the difference? Is it the love at home? Is it the father figure? Is it the expressions of love they feel? Do they have somewhere to turn to? What is it, Mr. Speaker? They're not ignored. They're in the same clubs. They go out. What's the difference, Mr. Speaker? If we're serious about our country, we've got to look at the real reasons. We cannot ignore it. Because I'm not about to ignore it. Because every single day that we say we have to lock up yet another boy, I think we're failing as a society. Every single day, Mr. Speaker, that they go to these schools and they're only there for the basketball championships and then they're gone, we're losing. We're not winning. Everyone who's failing, Mr. Speaker. And what happens to us is we find ourselves trying to find reasons to justify the behavior. And as I listen to all my colleagues speak, we hear about what we want to do in the criminal justice system. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to get out of the business of the criminal justice system, to be honest with you. I'd like to see less courts and less prisons. But the only way we can get there if we fix some of the problems we have now. And the only way we're going to fix them, if we understand to fix it, you've got to get in it. You got to go talk to the guys, find out what the heck's going on. And when you have these wars going on, Mr. Speaker, bring them all together. Let's see what we can do. Let's understand. Let's create a truce here. Let's get on the streets and try to fix some of these issues. Because, Mr. Speaker, we see what's going on. I don't agree with the leader of the opposition today. I don't agree with him on this point when he was talking about the number of murders. Yes, we have murders, but never use that as a political argument. I don't agree with that, Mr. Speaker. Point it out, which he must do as leader of the opposition. But let's remember, they got some families out there who are hurting still. Let's remember that we must never give that individual who committed that crime the luxury or the celebrity of what he did. He's wrong and should never be treated as if he's some celebrity. And that's why I get annoyed sometimes when I see their pictures in the newspaper. I'd like to see the story, but I want to see the picture. Because we make mistakes, Mr. Speaker, when we don't understand they have done wrong in the society. And we have to find a way to cause them to appreciate that their wrong is never going to be a right, Mr. Speaker. And so I want to see where we're able to talk to our young men and talk to our young people where they begin to understand what we're doing in this country to make a difference. And many of us who sit in this place, who are authorities, who are leaders, Mr. Speaker, they look up to it. In my constituency, they call me Daddy. Big man, Daddy Obi. Well, no problem. I can handle that. And Chief, we want to have a few today. No problem. Let me go sit with you, though. Let's talk. You want me to talk at your level? Let's go talk there. That's what it's all about, Mr. Speaker. We got to get them. We got to talk to them again. We cannot believe that they're out over there, over the hill, and because we live east or we live west, we have no connection with them. Something's wrong with that, Mr. Speaker, because that happens usually when you come home from school. You forget where you come from. You get a degree, you get a profession, you go east and you west, you forget over the hill. You forget where you come from. You forget the islands, Mr. Speaker. We got to go reach the young men. We got to go talk to those young men. Because the criminal justice system in our country, yes, it will work, Mr. Speaker. It will work. But I don't want it to get there. I want to get the guns out of the hands of those young men. I want to get the guns off the streets of our country, Mr. Speaker. And whilst the Minister of National Security is doing his job, and doing his job every single day, and working extremely long hours to get work done to ensure that he could protect this country because he knows his mandate. And as he works with the Commissioner of Police, who you know is an outstanding policeman, who you know worked extremely hard, and I know my experience in Grand Bahama. And when they're working their backsides off every day and to listen to people criticize, I get annoyed at that, Mr. Speaker, because it's so wrong we don't know how to say thank you. When we tell those policemen out there every single day, you go risk your life, but we forget that they have families too. And we forget that they got mortgages too. They got problems too. And what are we doing to help them with their issues, Mr. Speaker? If we're serious, let's show them that we love them too. Let's show them that we appreciate the work, and let's stop using this thing. And I want to say this, I've never used crime as a political argument. Never have, never will. Stand by that, Mr. Speaker. Check my record. Don't believe in it. Because, no, it's not my fault, but it is my problem, as it is his problem, as it is every single Bahamian's problem. So I've got to fix it. How do you think I feel as Minister of Tourism when someone comes to me and tells me we had an incident? I feel badly, Mr. Speaker, badly because not only of the person who's attacked, Mr. Speaker, but badly because we did the attacking. I feel badly about that, sir, because when you say you're a proud Bahamian and it's better in the Bahamas, it must be better in the Bahamas in every single thing. And when you have to compromise your positions, when you have to apologize, Mr. Speaker, then I believe we've lost something there. Mr. Speaker, so my argument is very simple. Let's go try to find the way. Let's look at the humanistic side of these things. Let's talk humanity to people. Let's go and meet the young men. Let's understand why they have problems today. You see, Mr. Speaker, you see the clerk in this house? The clerk in this House of Assembly used to live in Grand Bahama one time. And one time ago, the clerk used to coach young men playing basketball. I seen Clark here. He used to coach basketball. And he took a team called Freeport Transfers, Mr. Speaker, and some of the boys who all they did was run to the gyms. And what did he do? He turned them into champions, Mr. Speaker. He made them believe in themselves, and he had such a discipline. And these same bad boys who came from Hawksville and anywhere else, he made them men. Men who went on to join the police force and join other professions, Mr. Speaker. You know why he took the time? He went out there, he worked with them, and we used to laugh at them. They ain't gonna win no championship around here. That ain't happen. And they did, Mr. Speaker. They did because of his work. That's mentoring. He found them at where they wanted to be, and he went there and he worked with them every single day. Look where he is today. Look where many of them, many went on to college educations, Mr. Speaker, played in college. That's because of the work. So those of us who don't understand what we're doing here, and we could criticize, don't criticize, be a part of the solution. Find a way to talk to people. Find a way to go out there and talk to people. Mr. Speaker, you know, Sir Lyndon Pinley was a great Bahamian, you know. Not only because, Mr. Speaker, he was the leader of this country. It's because of how he inspired young men. The Member of Parliament for Andros, for Central Andros. Picewell Falls, Mr. Speaker, Mangrove Key in the south. Here's a young man who was in school and perhaps was accepted to the Royal Bahamas Police Force. He was. When he was in high school, he was accepted, ready to go. And then Sir Lyndon came and he spoke and he said, one day one of you will be me. You will represent us. And then he gave them an opportunity to come to the capital, Mr. Speaker, to go to the College of the Bahamas. That's how he got a scholarship, Mr. Speaker. And he got the education. That's how he ended up in ZNS, Mr. Speaker. And look where he is today. And now, Mr. Speaker, he's not only the ambassador. What is also important is for us to pay attention to this. He is the replacement of Sir Lyndon Pinley, the first PLP to be elected after Sir Lyndon Pinley. That is itself an honor, Mr. Speaker. And you said when you came to this place, you told of your story. You told of your story, how you were inspired by Sir Lyndon when your father was trying to get you off to school.
With no faith.
Mr. Speaker, what are we missing here? What are we missing here? We are missing that it comes down to us who sit in the offices of leadership. We're leaders of this country. Men and women look up to us, Mr. Speaker. We must use the opportunity to reach down and to pull up.
Yes.
Not to give handouts, to pull up.
Right.
To cause people to believe in themselves, to generate that interest. And Mr. Speaker, I'd really love to see your office lead a mentoring program from the parliamentary of this country, from the parliament of this country, Mr. Speaker, because I think it could work. I know it could work, and I know that we could bring young men from all over. We could put them in rooms. We could talk to them, Mr. Speaker. We can get them to believe in themselves. We can get them to understand that each one of them have a talent, and they could use that talent very effectively, Mr. Speaker, and they could make a difference. When I heard you this morning congratulate Sunland, I smiled, because while you were in the East, I was in the West. I was at the 8 Maroc High School last week, Mr. Speaker, at the graduation. And, Mr. Speaker, two things. I want to first and foremost congratulate the minister responsible for education. I want to do that, Mr. Speaker, because he took a decision, changed, and he brought a principal there. And the principal at 8 Maroc High School, who has now taken 8 Maroc High School from the days when I had all those rumors a couple of years ago, and now to a school that's leading on the Grand Bahama Island, Mr. Speaker. I want to congratulate you. Mr. Minister, I want to make sure the record shows that Ivan Butler, the principal of 8 Maroc High School, Blue Jays country, I want to talk about the incredible work that they did, Mr. Speaker, and I'm borrowing his speech, Mr. Speaker. This is a speech he gave last week at the graduation and the celebration, because he points out some things that I want to point out here in this honorable place, Mr. Speaker. He said the athletic season began with softball. He said they were most proud of the junior girls. They won both the local and national championships in Nassau. In basketball, our senior boys team won the Catholic High Christmas Invitational and were runners-up in the high school tip-off classic, the high school championship, and the Hugh Campbell Championship here in Nassau. Job well done, Mr. Speaker. And in track and field, we boast of 7th grader Hiltronique Pinder, named most outstanding junior female athlete, and Kitchener Penn, who was also awarded the most outstanding junior male athlete. Our head girl, Kadisha, listen to this, Mr. Speaker, our head girl, Kadisha Heald, a 2-time Carifta medalist, recently qualified for the World Youth Championship in 200 and the 400. She will travel to Ukraine to represent the country, this summer. And then, Mr. Speaker, when she's finished, she's going to take her talents to Essex College in New Jersey this fall, Mr. Speaker. And she received her scholarship. Got a scholarship, Mr. Speaker. Our junior Junkanoo group won first place in the secondary school division. And, Mr. Speaker, in academics, they have made steady progress. And listen to this, Mr. Speaker, and I think this is very important. He said, with the unfailing support and commitment of our teachers, the academic performance of our students continues to strengthen in the absence of some technical teachers. In the absence, Mr. Speaker, no problem, we can move on. We created a new, listen to this, Mr. Speaker, we created a new computer-aided drafting lab and introduced this program to the school. Now, many of our students are exposed to the field of architecture and drafting. This ain't my rock, you know. This is the oldest high school in Grand Bahama. This is the high school that everybody don't check for. This is the one. This is the one I'm talking about. We are one of only 2 schools that offer this course. Many teachers had lunchtime and after-school classes. An intervention academic program was put in place for our challenged male students. Challenged male students, Mr. Speaker. Also, for the first time, a club was organized for the at-risk girls. Club for the at-risk girls. These initiatives paid much dividends, as after the first term, there was an overall increase in the GPAs of our students. We also awarded Most Improved. 8 Mile Rock High School was awarded Most Improved B School from the Ministry of Education, Science, and Technology for improvement in BGCSE and BJC results, Mr. Speaker. Most improved. In 1 year. 1 year, Mr. Speaker. And let me go further, Mr. Speaker, and look at some of the personal achievements. Patrick Boston, a 7th grade student, received an A in BGCSE music exams. Ashley Major, an outstanding ranger, has received early acceptance in the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Julian Mizik and Ashley Rollins, our police cadets, have also received early acceptance into the Royal Bahamas Police Force. Vashti Shelton won the Junior Minister of Tourism Award in Grand Bahama and is being considered for a Youth Ambassador Award with the United States Embassy. O'Neill Poitier won a $3,000 scholarship to Lincoln Tech after attending their culinary boot camp. Luciano Simmons won the Young Chef Award here in Grand Bahama and then went on to Nassau and placed 2nd overall. He also received a $5,000 scholarship to attend Lincoln Tech Culinary Institute. Philia Jones and Tierra Prox have all been accepted to Lincoln Tech this fall. 28 of our students have graduated from the Bahama Host program. Janika Dean, Rose Filzami, and Aliyah Mather have all graduated from the Nursing Cadet program. The Photo Club students, Whitney Duncan, Calvin Bridgewater, Andre Williams, Johannes Bow, and Antonio Johnson and Whitney Jane, won 7 of 12 photos in the Port Authority calendar competition. And, Mr. Speaker, junior team of Jareel Clinton, Ron Lewis, and Peter Grant placed first in the Sesame Bottle Rocket competition. Mr. Speaker, they did exceptionally well. These students did exceptionally well, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, I am so proud of this school. I am so proud, Mr. Speaker, because a couple of years ago I sat in this place. I was a part of a committee when that school had to face the embarrassment of what was going on, Mr. Speaker. And Ivan Butler has come to that institution. He's brought leadership. He has been able to provide the leadership that's required, Mr. Speaker. And look at our youngsters, they're turning their lives around. And at their graduation class, Mr. Speaker, they had almost half of the graduation class were young men who had made the grade point average, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that is why this is a proud moment for those people. It's a proud moment for me as a member of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, and I look forward to the day when we build in 8 Mile Rock that new high school. That new high school, Mr. Speaker, that will cause for more of our children to have opportunities and to be able to take their talents, develop their talent, and take it somewhere, Mr. Speaker. That's what we do. We want to empower our young people, Mr. Speaker. And when you have leadership like Ivan Butler, Mr. Speaker, it makes a difference. Mr. Speaker, equally, I am pleased and proud. A week or 2 weeks ago, Mr. Speaker, we were at the Caribbean Tourism Organization's meeting in New York. And at that meeting, Mr. Speaker, they had a colloquium for college students. And, Mr. Speaker, the team of Adriana Knowles, a 21-year-old student in hospitality management of the College of the Bahamas, Christy Russell, a 22-year-old student in tourism management at the College of the Bahamas, Taran Sims, a 22-year-old student at and Small Island Sustainability, and Mr. Waylon McCarty, both of the College of the Bahamas in Tourism Management, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they competed against University of West Indies, Trinidad, and Jamaica, and all the universities, Mr. Speaker, and the Bahamas placed second to the universities in the Caribbean competition, Mr. Speaker. They did exceptionally well. I was very proud, Mr. Speaker, to hear these two young men and two young ladies stand up and talk about a plan for sustainable tourism. They had a plan, Mr. Speaker, where you should be able to come off the cruise ships, and once you land in any destination in the region, use your smartphone and be able to map your way around the island. They curated it, Mr. Speaker. They showed their ability to think. They showed their ability to lead, Mr. Speaker, and I'm so very proud of them, Mr. Speaker, because they did very well and they made the Bahamas very proud. And I also want to congratulate Travis Robinson. He is the Junior Minister of Tourism. He's currently a student at the C.L. Walker Senior High School. And, Mr. Speaker, whilst they were in New York, we took the opportunity to allow them to spend some time at the Bahamas Embassy. And we also allowed them to go to Ground Zero, Mr. Speaker. We not only wanted them to see what tourism does, but we also wanted them to understand where the world is. And so we had them spend time with Dr. Nuri. And we also had them go to Ground Zero to see what happened on that day, to feel it, Mr. Speaker, to feel what happened on that day in history. Mr. Speaker, I think they're the better because of the experience. These are the young men and young women who one day can sit in the places that we're sitting today and will lead our country, Mr. Speaker, and we must give them every single opportunity we can for them to make a difference in our Commonwealth. And so, Mr. Speaker, I'm extremely proud of those students and all the work that they're doing, Mr. Speaker, and I believe that they're going to make a difference. In fact, Mr. Speaker, McCarty is now working at the Bahamas Air. Waylon McCarty, but he studied tourism management. He graduated this year too, Mr. Speaker, and I'm hoping that he's able to join the Ministry of Tourism because he's one of those young men that we must have in, because a part of what we want to do, Mr. Speaker, is grow our economy using Bahamians. Because I've made it very clear that a part of my philosophy is taking local global. We're going to use Bahamians to sell our country, to make sure people know what we're talking about, make sure they understand what we're doing in the tourism industry, to be able to tap all areas and every single avenue so that we can make the tourism industry, the premier tourism industry of our country, great again. Mr. Speaker, we are facing tremendous difficulties insofar as employment is concerned. All colleagues spoke about unemployment, and each colleague that spoke about unemployment spoke specifically about their constituency, about the issues that they face in their constituency. Mr. Speaker, I've been studying the work being done by the International Labor Organization, particularly the organization that has responsibility at the United Nations for the National Employment Agency and also Worldwide Organization of Labor Market Forces, Mr. Speaker. I've been paying attention to what's been said by their president, and their president is a lady by the name of Angelis Shavskis, Mr. Speaker. She made an incredible speech recently, and I want just for us to understand where we are globally, because we must understand where the world is if we're ever going to deal with some of the issues that we do have. And I keep telling people, whilst we believe that we have problems, the world has greater problems, but we got to solve ours, because we all know all politics is local. You got to take care of your business at home. But in the global environment, we must understand that many of the issues that we face are also issues other countries are facing. And let's look at some of the other countries and get some of the experiences and use from their experiences some of the resolutions that they have found. Mr. Speaker, here is an interesting point. And she says of the many and varied repercussions of the 2008-2009 financial crisis, one that has rippled across borders to impact both developed and developing economies, has been surging unemployment. Over the last few years, the numbers of people estimated to be out of work has grown to total more than 200 million, which is an increase of 27 million since the beginning of the crisis. This is since the beginning of 2008. And even rapid, listen to this, Mr. Speaker, and even rapid growth economies have not proved immune, although some regions have enjoyed robust economic expansion, this hasn't led to a greater increase in employment. Take the Middle East and North Africa, for example. Although the region enjoys many strengths, natural resources, and substantial budget surpluses among oil exporters, for example, high unemployment, particularly youth unemployment, remains a key problem. The primary reason for this is a skills mismatch. Interesting, Mr. Speaker. Again, sometimes I wonder, they're talking about our country, and I know my colleague, the minister responsible for immigration, I know what he's going through because he's trying to get more Bahamians in places where they can receive opportunity. But we're also always hearing this argument that Bahamians aren't qualified, Bahamians aren't ready, Bahamians aren't prepared. But here's the issue, Mr. Speaker. It says that most foreign companies setting up base in the region, most foreign companies setting up base, and she's talking here about the Middle East and North Africa. She says most foreign companies setting up base in the region prefer to employ immigrant labor due to a shortage of a skilled workforce. Reducing the skill mismatch between nationals and non-nationals is therefore a top priority for the Middle Eastern countries. But that sounds like a top priority for the Bahamas as well, Mr. Speaker. And she goes on to argue in this case that what many companies are now finding is that the job market has changed. In 2008, whilst the business was running, you might have had 200 employees. But when you downsize, you discover that you could run with 60. And so now they're not seeking to replace the numbers. What they're arguing, Mr. Speaker, now is that you have to go and find new jobs. You've got to create new employment. That's the problem that we face in the Bahamas as well. And we'll talk about what we're doing in the tourism industry, but Mr. Speaker, just allow me to very quickly talk about the whole promise of what we see about to take place in the North Andros with the agricultural development, Mr. Speaker. That is one of the answers, Mr. Speaker. Whether we like it or not, supplying food for our own sustenance is fundamentally important, Mr. Speaker. And when you can find opportunities in the plan that has been discussed, and I'm sure when the leader speaks, he will speak to, or the Prime Minister, the member for Centerville speaks, he will speak to all that must happen. Because we're talking about the employment of hundreds of Bahamians, Mr. Speaker, and we're talking about the creation of a food ministry, if you like, that will be providing food for not only Bahamians, but also for an export market, because no matter what we think, the growth of our economy, Mr. Speaker, will depend heavily on us developing something to export. We must appreciate that we have to cause for a larger return on our exports. Tourism is an export, they argue. But the truth is, Mr. Speaker, if we can find that product that we're able to ship to the world, that will cause more greenbacks to come this way, Mr. Speaker, the truth is you'll build a strong economy. The truth is we'll have more reserves. The truth is we'll have a stronger economy. The truth is we'll be able to create more jobs, Mr. Speaker. That's what we have to think about. So if we're able to use agriculture in the way that's being forecasted, Mr. Speaker, just imagine the difference that we're going to make in providing for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And so I want to congratulate the Prime Minister, who, as the Member of Parliament for North Andros and the Berry Islands said just last week, he said the Prime Minister told him when he asked him to run that that would be the mission. And he's fulfilling that mission, Mr. Speaker. And trust me, it's going to make a difference. Could you imagine, we have all these hotels in the Bahamas, particularly the large ones, Mr. Speaker. Could you imagine that if the hotels were able to buy local produce and buy their beef and buy what they need to supply the hotels, just imagine that $1 million fee that we have now, that cost that we spend now to import, could you imagine how that's going to drop, Mr. Speaker? And when that drops, Mr. Speaker, more money stays home, goes to the local community, and it circulates, Mr. Speaker. Could you imagine what we could be doing? Could you imagine what we could be doing and more opportunities we're going to provide? Because it's already here. We could provide for the cruise lines, Mr. Speaker. It's already here. We just need the industry to be developed, to be managed. And over the next several years, we can see the surplus, we can see the growth, we can see how things are going to make a difference, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, when we were in New York just a couple of weeks ago, what was very interesting is that the Bahamas is on the way back. Mr. Speaker, took us a very hit, Mr. Speaker, because the world changed on us. Mr. Speaker, we're forgetting some important things in our arguments. The first is, Mr. Speaker, we're forgetting that we do have competition right now. There was a time when we didn't have much competition. 1971, for instance, Mr. Speaker, when the Bahamas did its first 1 million tourists, we didn't have competition for the Dominican Republic and those other countries. But today we do have competition, Mr. Speaker. And not only that, Mr. Speaker, we have also high electricity costs. I was so very pleased when I heard the member for Tall Pines speak last week, and he talked about the reduction in electricity costs that will be felt by all the hotels. Because that's important, Mr. Speaker, because today we are 300% more in charges. Our cost is 300% more than any in the region, Mr. Speaker. Could you imagine competing with that? Could you imagine how that serves as a difficult position to be in? Could you imagine the problems that some of our hotels experience and the fight that they go through every single day, Mr. Speaker? So we have to understand that. And of course, our labor costs are high. Well, we have unions, we have demands, and we have high labor costs. That's the reality. So that is why we have to understand where we are. And we have still only 14,000 hotel rooms. In fact, we've lost hotel rooms over the many years. We've lost our numbers. But when you consider the Dominican Republic today has 100,000 hotel rooms, Jamaica got 50,000. Could you imagine? Could you imagine where we are now? These people came after us, you know, Mr. Speaker. Yeah. But now we're the ones. Look as if we're trying to play catch up. And Mr. Speaker, we made some decisions that I don't agree with. We made a decision to shut down our offices. I don't agree with that decision at all, Mr. Speaker.
Worldwide.
See, when we shut down the office in New York, when we shut down the office in Atlanta, I ain't sure that was a good idea. In fact, Mr. Speaker, I know it was not a good idea. Stand by that, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, when we downsized the office in London, what did we do to Europe? And then, Mr. Speaker, we forgot that there's an emerging Chinese market. Mr. Speaker, the only market we seem to have stayed and played close attention to was the Latin American market. And we started that before we left. And you know when we started, what people said? It ain't gonna work.
Yeah, that is.
But it's working.
Yeah, good.
You see what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker? It's working now. But this is what I don't... And then, Mr. Speaker, we took the people off the streets. We took a decision that we were not going to deal... And yes, it is true, Mr. Speaker, online technology, no problem. But you can have the online technology, and every research is showing now that while you need online, you still need the travel agent. And then, Mr. Speaker, we took another decision, that we don't want to deal with groups. We can let the hotels deal with groups. So we shut down that department. Mr. Speaker, I just want to refer to something very quickly, Mr. Speaker, because I want us to understand what we've had to do in the Ministry of Tourism, and because these things are fundamentally important. Mr. Speaker, I just want to refer to some information here, another fact sheet that people would understand. The group's business alone in terms of conventions is worth around $5.6 billion. That's just meetings, groups and meetings, $5.6 billion, and highest among them all is religious tourism, Mr. Speaker. But I just want you to know, $5.6 billion. Mr. Speaker, and when I became minister last year, one of the things that I did right away was to go look for some group business. Because my theory was very simple. Let's get some people in the hotels. Let's get some people in the rooms. Let's get some people at night, getting them for overnight visits. You know why, Mr. Speaker? Because if we could do that, we're going to get more business. And so, Mr. Speaker, I just want you to note that before the government changed, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 conferences. 7, Mr. Speaker. And I want you to let you know that, I want you to know that from the time we took over to the end of last year, we ended up with a significantly high number of group businesses, Mr. Speaker. More than 57. More than 57 we've had so far. More than 57 we've had since we've taken over, Mr. Speaker. And we're continuing to grow. We're also booking for next year and the year beyond, Mr. Speaker. And you know why? These groups bring business. Lots of business. Lots of business to the islands. And Mr. Speaker, when you consider radio stations like Radio 1 that came here just a couple of weeks ago and brought 2,000 people with them, Mr. Speaker, And when I was in New York last week and I was able to visit with the owners of the radio station, Mr. Speaker, this is the Bahamas. The whole focus is the Bahamas. They're meeting in the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. They're meeting with the Prime Minister. There's the Prime Minister of the Bahamas. There's Bishop Neil Ellis. There's the Minister of Tourism as well. Mr. Speaker, the point is, they are now talking about our country. They came here with 2,000 people. And the week before that, Tom Joyner came with 3,500, Mr. Speaker. 3,500. And they're coming back. Because what we're trying to do is lay the foundation to get more of that business. We want to keep it coming. We want to keep it coming, Mr. Speaker. That group business is fundamentally important. So we want to make sure that we get more and more group business to our country. Because if we don't do it, Mr. Speaker, we'll be crying tomorrow. And this, Mr. Speaker, speaks to our need to get more airlift. Mr. Speaker, we lost airlift. We lost airlift. We lost inventory in airlift. We lost inventory in hotel rooms. We lost airlift. We lost inventory. So our job, Mr. Speaker, is to now get this airlift back. Before we left, in fact, the IMF report had said that the Bahamas peaked in 2007, 2008. In fact, this is the report that we gave, Mr. Speaker. And the truth is, we did. We did. We had a gentleman by the name of Tyrone Sawyer, who's now in sports tourism. He helped build the airlift. He helped build the airlift to the point, Mr. Speaker, where we had companies like JetBlue. JetBlue, who is in the Bahamas, and I want you to, Mr. Speaker, just let me read this, what JetBlue just sent me just the other day. JetBlue says, on behalf of JetBlue's 15,000 crew members, and especially our Nassau-based crew members and their general manager, Alan Sweeting, thank you for welcoming my colleagues. As we discussed, JetBlue greatly values the long-standing partnership we have with the government, and in particular, the Ministry of Tourism and Airport. Our brand and the Bahamas brand have meshed well since our inaugural flight in 2004. We're always looking for ways to strengthen our network and to service the Bahamas. They are looking for ways to further service the Bahamas now, Mr. Speaker. That's where we are, because we need the airlift. We need more airlift, Mr. Speaker, and I'm working on that every single day. In fact, Mr. Speaker, it is not out of line, it's not out of turn. Mr. Tyrone Sawyer will be returning to that division, to head up that division, to go get that airlift that we lost when we lost office in 2008. Mr. Speaker, Delta just announced this past week, or I was informed this past week, that Delta is now going to increase its service to Exuma beginning late fall, Mr. Speaker. They're now moving their numbers to 3 flights a week. Delta, now consider this, Mr. Speaker, Delta is lifting there, because what are they saying about Exuma? They're saying that Exuma is showing signs of progress, and they feel very good about the future of Exuma. So we are seeking to get more airlift into all our destinations. Grand Bahama, Abaco, Bimini, Eleuthera, Exuma, and of course the capital city. We want to get more airlift. Mr. Speaker, and the reason for that is the Bahamas is again in demand. Mr. Speaker, I wish to refer to a report that was just recently released. And this was done by one of the companies, that MMGY Global. Mr. Speaker, this is very important. I think people ought to pay attention to it, because it says, in terms of interested in visiting the Bahamas, they did a survey, Mr. Speaker, and the survey showed that the large majority of people are interested in visiting the Caribbean. 52% of the people who earn under $125,000 want to visit the Caribbean. 59% of people who earn more than $125,000 want to visit the Caribbean. That places us at number 2, right behind Hawaii. But here's what's interesting, Mr. Speaker. What's interesting is, in the Caribbean, the place that 67% of those who earn under $125,000 and 61% of those who earn over $125,000 want to come to is where? The Bahamas. The Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we're back. We are there. Now what we need is airlift to go get the people here. That's the point, Mr. Speaker. We're coming back, and we need to get the people to come here. And you need airlift to get them here. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the reality is we are going to need about 400,000 more visitors to the Bahamas when Bahama opens. 400,000. 500,000. And Mr. Speaker, we now must move our occupancy levels from 55 to 60%. We got to get it to 75%, Mr. Speaker. It's not good enough. That's not good enough. You're not going to sustain the industry. That's why we are working so hard. You have a good team, Mr. Speaker, and my team now, we've trained about 25 or so employees, trained them in the new marketing skills, and they're about to hit the streets. We're going to reopen Atlanta. We're going to reopen New York. We're going to place somebody in London. We're going to go after the Chinese market a way we've never done before, Mr. Speaker, and our staff is now ready to do it, Mr. Speaker. We have a staff that is so complete, so ready now, Mr. Speaker, because we're going to go after the group business the way we've never done before. We're going to go after groups, Mr. Speaker. We're going to go after universities, Mr. Speaker. We're appointing somebody just to target universities. We're going to go after associations. And we're talking about referees and all those kind of people who take breaks. We're going to go after firemen and police associations and all these groups. They all take vacations, Mr. Speaker. And my intention is to get rid of this view that you can get business in September and October. That's nonsense. They still traveled last year, Mr. Speaker. 1 billion people traveled. December 14th last year marked 1 billion people traveled. If they're traveling, they're going somewhere. But why we can't get a piece of that? We want more people to come, but we want them to come year-round, Mr. Speaker. Year-round. And that is why group business is fundamentally important in what we do. The work with the travel agents, we are now renewing our relationships with the travel agents. We have a new team that will be talking to travel agents, Mr. Speaker, every single day. In fact, I spoke to several last week and invited them to come to the Bahamas for a conference so we could show them this Bahamas, not just the capital city, but to show them Grand Bahama and Abaco and Eleuthera and all the islands of the Bahamas that we do have now for the offering. It's important, Mr. Speaker, because that's the only way we're going to be able to get the message out that the Bahamas is more than just a capital city. It's more than Grand Bahama. And what we're going to do, Mr. Speaker, we're going to bring them to this country so they can see and so they can go and they can talk. And then, Mr. Speaker, we want to make sure that the digital platform is properly done. I heard the member for Long Island speak this week, and let me just say, the member is absolutely correct. She's absolutely correct about how we should be marketing the islands. No difficulty with what she says, Mr. Speaker, because that's our job. Each island of the Bahamas. And I was so shocked when I went to Long Island, and I discovered in Long Island that Long Island has 13 hotels. I didn't know that, to be honest with you. Never knew it. And have some of the nicest boutique hotels, Mr. Speaker. I was shocked out of my wits, believe it or not. And when you heard the member for Engleson speak about the need to fix the airport, she's right. Because if you can't get airlift in there, then what are you going to do? If they don't have the airlift, then it's never going to realize its full potential. So we are now working on ensuring that the Blue Hole that the member spoke about, NBC is coming to do a special report on the Blue Hole. And we're now working with them, and I must say, Mr. Speaker, that it is a responsibility to brief the member, and we haven't briefed her yet, Mr. Speaker, and we intend to. Because the truth is they do intend to come to the island to do some shooting, and they want to do a program there because it is a wonder of the world. And so we're going to take advantage of that. It's one of the major networks. We're going to take advantage of that, Mr. Speaker. And the truth is, more will be done in islands like Long Island because we do have all this to offer. Mr. Speaker, just look at Eleuthera. Look at what Sidney Torres is doing at the Cove in Eleuthera. For the first time, Eleuthera has a television ad running in the United States of America. A television ad promoting Eleuthera. First time. And he did it on his own, Mr. Speaker. He called me and told me we're doing this ad and we're going to invite you to be a part of it. I said, well, when are you going to do it? He says, it's done. And we're about to air the ad. It's a beautiful ad, Mr. Speaker. It's a beautiful ad because now it's intended to get more people focused on Eleuthera. Because Eleuthera, too, is seeing a rebirth. And Eleuthera has many more hotels and good-looking hotels, not only in the Eleuthera North and South, but we're also talking about Harbor Island. And we want to make sure, Mr. Speaker, and if we can, we want to get that oil problem or the fuel problem resolved in Eleuthera because it will help us get more airlift into Eleuthera. because the whole argument is you need the airlift and you need the refueling, then they can also go over to Cat Island. And so we're working on it right now. And because we have to make it happen, we get to, in the South, we have to open it up to ensure that people are able to come to the island and they're able to benefit, or the island can benefit from the people coming to the island. The island of Abaco, Mr. Speaker. Abaco has a wonderful history of having the second homeowners. The second homeowners, they got plenty of the second homeowners. But they also have many of the great hotels. Abaco has outstanding, Baker's Bay, Winding Bay, outstanding hotels. And the truth is, they're some of the best hotels in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Now, how do we get more business there? The minister is working on the airport. We're also working on the runway, but they also land down in Treasure Key as well. But we want to cause for more activity in Abaco. We want Abaco to take its rightful place in our offering, because Abaco has so much to offer to the world. In fact, Mr. Speaker, you're going to hear us talk about it more and more. We are now going to cause for the sponsorship of the Bahamas Pro-Am tournament, golf tournament. Why? Because it's the cause for Abaco, it's the cause for Exuma, it's the cause for Grand Bahama. We're going to have a series of places where the tournament takes place. And because, Mr. Speaker, it's going to help all the islands to get the promotion, because no one has golf courses like Abaco, and no one has it like Exuma, and no one has it like the Six in Grand Bahama. You hear what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker? So in addition to the silk that's taking place on Paradise Island, in addition to what we're going to see Travis Stock that's going to take place in Albany, where the Tiger Woods and others will come next year we're going to have a Pro-Am all over the Commonwealth, because it's going to give us the exposure we want to be able to see the islands of the Bahamas. That's our product. And you know, Mr. Speaker, and you know we can get the good member for Golden Gates to come and play in one of those tournaments. You know, he's a pro, you know. He's only humoring us by being in here with us. He's really a pro. But to get into play. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, and I want to salute the member for Golden Gates, and I want to salute the minister responsible for sports, Mr. Speaker. It's important. When we had the first silk just a couple of weeks ago, they pushed to get Bahamians to play in that tournament. I mean, Golden Gates was getting on my nerve. I mean, he was just texting, and he was asking, "What about this one? What about this one?" And I want to say thank you very much, because and the minister responsible certainly made it happen. The Minister of Sports, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank both of them, because they saw an opportunity for the Bahamians, and they seized that opportunity, Mr. Speaker, and Golden Gates played a major role in that. Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, let me whilst I'm at it, let me just say that the Minister of Sports is a doggone good Minister of Sports. Let me say that, Mr. Speaker. And I can say that, Mr. Speaker, because we work well together. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, everything we're doing in terms of sports tourism, you may see the Minister of Sports more at these events than you'd see me. But the truth is, that's the partnership. My job is to get them here. His job is to make sure that they are here and everything else takes place. And he does a wonderful job, Mr. Speaker. And what you find is we have this camaraderie that I could talk to him and say, we want to do this, and he says, okay, let's make it happen, and we make it happen. And then I say, you know, I can't make this place, can you go there? He's gone. Speaker, that's how it works. That's why you're seeing whether it's the golf or whether it's the soccer, that's why you see it, and you'll see the minister more and more and more, because our job is to bring the business to the Bahamas, fill the beds. His job is to make sure that everything is comfortable, the facilities are ready, that we have these wonderful tournaments, and he has oversight of these tournaments, and he makes good speeches at the tournaments. So, Mr. Speaker, we have a wonderful team, and I want to thank the Minister for the work that you're doing, a wonderful job you're doing in sports tourism. Outstanding work, Mr. Speaker, and let me tell you something. That's going to make the difference, because right now I'm in negotiations to have the first international volleyball tournament, beach volleyball tournament in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, and we're about to close the deal on that as I speak right now, Mr. Speaker, because again, we're talking about bringing bodies to our country, all types of bodies to our country. They're going to come, Mr. Speaker, and I know you're going to see the minister there. Mr. Speaker, I'll get back to Bimini and those for just a minute, but Mr. Speaker, just let me say that this is and we don't know how great we are as a country sometimes, and we don't pay attention. This is one of the more important magazines out there for the tourism industry. And this is the Reader's Choice Platinum list. And Mr. Speaker, I want us to look at something here. I remember I was on the plane with the Ambassador Forbes and the Prime Minister when we were traveling from Trinidad. And Mr. Speaker, the Ambassador was so excited when he saw this article because in the top 20 in the Caribbean, the #1 resort in the entire Caribbean, top 20, Reader's Choice, is Atlantis. Yeah. #1, Atlantis. It's Atlantis, man. And number 8 is where? One and only Ocean Club. Yeah. We got 2 in the top 10. We got 2 in the top 10, Mr. Speaker. Shouldn't we be proud of that, Mr. Speaker? And Mr. Speaker, when we go to the top 10 family resorts, guess who's #1? Disney. But guess who's #2? Atlantis. That's the league we're in, Mr. Speaker. That's the league that we're in. And we got to give congratulations to George McIntonis and his staff over there at Atlantis for the work that they're doing to be able to maintain and hold on to such a reputation. That is significant, Mr. Speaker. And we should not ignore it. We sometimes downplay who and what we are and what we have. We don't appreciate that what they're saying in this is, yes, the resort is #1, but who's made it #1? The staff over there, Mr. Speaker, who they is. We own. They are people. They're the Bahamian people that made it #1. So when we understand, it's just not the name, it's the service. It's the activity. Well, who's doing it? The Bahamian people. In both of those resorts. And so our people need to be congratulated. I'm so very proud of the work they're doing over there, Mr. Speaker, because it just tells you where they're going. It tells you where we're going as a country. And let no one fool you when I talk about the surge, where we're coming and how we're getting back. Look at American Express, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have renewed our relationship with American Express. We've done so, Mr. Speaker, because, you know, we had stopped all print ads. We'd stop ads. I don't know why we just stopped the ads. We just didn't have any more ads running. And so we've now, print ads. We didn't have print ads for several years. We stopped them. And I'm sure it's budget. We just stopped it. But the truth is, I believe that you have to have a place. If you go to Miami, if you go to New York right now, and you go to Broadway right now, you would see a big sign of the Bahamas up there. And you know what you'll see? You know what you'd see in that big sign? You'll see the same picture here. You see the same beautiful picture here on Broadway. You'll see that. You'll see that, Mr. Speaker. You'll see that. You'll see that. You'll see that, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. You'll see that. That's what you'll see, the Bahamas. You'll see this in Broadway right now. Big picture. Big thing in Broadway. And this thing? It's
the flamingos look nice.
That's what you see. And also, Mr. Speaker, that is what you see, Mr. Speaker. That is what you see on Broadway today. That's what you see, Mr. Speaker. And American Express wrote a nice note. It says, thank you for helping bring back the relationship between the Bahamas and American Express Publishing. Mr. Speaker, why is that important? Let's not miss why that's important. Mr. Speaker, American Express provided me with this information. In the Caribbean last year, there was $1 billion spent by using American Express cards. $1 billion. $1 billion. Mr. Speaker, but I want to, and whilst we're talking about the region, there was $1 billion spent using the American Express credit card. But in the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, for a 12-month period, by use of the American Express credit card, $217 million spent. In the Bahamas. In a 12-month period. Are you serious? This American Express, he's saying this. 217 million American Express. Now, Mr. Speaker, which speaks to, and they're saying that it's an increase of 4% compared to the previous year, which shows that there's an increase. Mr. Speaker, let's go one step further, Mr. Speaker. This is now MasterCard. MasterCard has informed us, Mr. Speaker, that they've seen an increase of 62% from 150 million in 2010 to $244 million in 2012. Wow. MasterCard, use of the card in the Bahamas. To the point now where they want to become the official card of the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker.
What? Now you're talking.
That's what I'm talking
Now
about.
you're talking.
That's where we are. That's where we are. They know the Bahamas is a hot ticket. We have to understand that. We now will get that business and bring it to the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, because that's what it's all about. If we can get that business to the Bahamas, we'll be in the best shape that we've ever been in. People are coming to our country, Mr. Speaker, and they're coming looking for they're coming looking for all that we have, and that is why what's fundamentally important. Mr. Speaker, that's why it's important for us to appreciate that the Bahamas must focus on product. Mr. Speaker, I want no one to ever believe that we're not serious about product. No one should ever believe we're not serious about product. And I think, Mr. Speaker, one of the difficulties I do have is when the members opposite have taken what the Prime Minister said about staging an event in the Bahamas like Mardi Gras or like Carnival. The Prime Minister never said we can stage Carnival or Mardi Gras in the Bahamas. He was trying to create the picture to show what it is and how it could work. And the truth is, Mr. Speaker, what he's talking about is something like a Bahamas Junkanoo Festival, which is different. But it's a festival where the emphasis is. And the truth is, it allows for opportunity, Mr. Speaker. And what he said may be around Easter time. Not necessarily. There is a committee, there is a group that's working on this now, but it's all intended, Mr. Speaker, to serve as a festival. Here is our problem, Mr. Speaker. We are promoting Junkanoo every day. Last 2 weeks we were in New York, and we're talking about come to the Bahamas for Junkanoo, but when you can get it? Christmas and New Year's. So we are promising something that we can't deliver. But if we put it on the calendar as an annual event, Mr. Speaker, where you can come for 1 week, and there are events taking place relative or centered around Junkanoo, whether it's the dancers, whether it's the music, whether it's a concerts, whether it's a parade, whatever it is, Mr. Speaker, where you can come and get your costumes and get your whistles and get your souvenirs, Mr. Speaker. The truth is it becomes one of the festivals that people want to come through. Every single year we'll have thousands of people. Not only that, Mr. Speaker, it's also a wonderful homecoming for Bahamians. Bahamians all over the world will want to come back at that time if they can't make it at Christmas or at New Year's, Mr. Speaker. But it becomes a festival that allows for participation of those who come and want to be a part. It was never intended to be a Mardi Gras, never intended to be the carnival. That's theirs. We can't teach nothing from nobody. Somebody said the other day that we want to teach something. You got to be joking. Got to be joking. We don't need to, Mr. Speaker. We don't need to. We have Junkanoo. We want to cause Junkanoo to become a festival that the world is able to participate in, to enjoy, to be a part of, Mr. Speaker. That's what we want. We want to create economic opportunity around the Junkanoo, where the Junkanoo leaders and Junkanoo groups can find themselves preparing, making souvenirs, becoming entrepreneurs, becoming business people, Mr. Speaker. That's the whole purpose. And so I look forward to it, and it will be introduced in 2015, because it's going to become one of the most significant festivals that is staged in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Yes. In the entire region. Yes, sir.
In the entire region. And people forget that. And I want to add, Mr. Speaker, because the Prime Minister may speak to it tomorrow, let me speak to it now. The truth is, you got Willa Francis, and you got Gus Cooper, the premier Junkanoos in the country. They're leading this, Mr. Speaker, together. Because they understand. They've been around the world. They've seen what these festivals are all about. And they want one in the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. And we're going to have a great one in the Bahamas in 2015. Trust me, we will. And, Mr. Speaker, over the next 12 months, you're going to hear more about signature events in the Family Islands. Each island of the Bahamas must have the signature event, a signature event that will cause and attract people to the respective islands. We want to make sure, Mr. Speaker, that each island has a celebration that's unique. Whether we go to Eleuthera, and we're talking now, and we're going to sit down and talk with the members of Parliament to have a unique festival. We've already started a discussion with the Member of Parliament for the North, for the South. We're going to have to talk to the member to make sure there's something in the central of Eleuthera that celebrates what Eleuthera is. It celebrates also the fact that Eleuthera was where democracy was for us at one point, where we had the Parliament, Mr. Speaker. We want to make sure that comes and we can celebrate that annually. Mr. Speaker, when I read earlier, when I read the Constitution, the preamble, it talked about the New World. Well, we're going to go to San Salvador and cause for an event in San Salvador on an annual basis, Mr. Speaker, right there where that cross stands, because it just makes sense. It's a part of history. We're going to have and join with the member for Cat Island and cause the Cat Island Rake and Scrape Festival to become one of those marketing tools, Mr. Speaker. It's unique. It's unique, Mr. Speaker, and we're going to pump more into that and make it work. We're going to cause that festival that went on last weekend in Andros, the Andros Crab Festival, to again become one of those stellar events in our country. Mr. Speaker, each island of the Bahamas must have a signature event. Must have a signature event. And as we speak to it, Mr. Speaker, I want to make sure they understand that this year, Gumbe Summer will return to this capital city, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I want, and people don't understand, Gumbe was even before independence. The Gumbe Summer Fest was held even before independence in 1973. And you won't believe it, Mr. Speaker, that it was May that same year when the Prime Minister was on national radio talking about the importance of Gumbe Summer, the interfacing of, you were one part of the, there we go, Mr. Speaker, and then we let it die. It died after 92. Mr. Speaker, it's one of those festivals that allows for Bahamians to participate, allows for Bahamians, vendors, to have an opportunity to earn some money. It allows for the tourists to participate. So we are now beginning the preparation of it, Mr. Speaker, and we'll have Gumbe in Grand Bahama and some of the islands as well, and also, Mr. Speaker, we're going to have the return of the West End Move as well, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's all intended to help lift our product. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, I'm so very pleased of the work that's being done by the Bay Street Redevelopment Committee. Mr. Speaker, they've done an outstanding job. That Pompey Square is going to be fantastic. And it's opening, the Prime Minister is scheduled to open it this week, Mr. Speaker. That in itself is a part of the product that we're going to be offering the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, that we're going to be offering to the world. I think it's so important because, Mr. Speaker, if there's one area where the Bahamas continues to rate low in, and that is activity, and that is cultural and heritage experiences, Mr. Speaker. So we've got to fix it. That's why all that we're talking about is to fix those problems, Mr. Speaker. We rate low in those areas. We're defeated where we rate low. We rate behind some of the competitors in the region, Mr. Speaker. So we want to make sure that we offer more. So I want to congratulate Ed Fields and other members of that committee on the work that they're doing. Additionally, Mr. Speaker, we've just completed the drawings for Junkanoo Beach. The Junkanoo Beach drawings are now completed. We're going to begin some work on Junkanoo Beach again to improve it, to make sure that it's one of those exciting spots in the capital where we have entertainment, where we have fun, where people can go, whether you walk from the cruise ship or leave the hotels, where you have a unique Bahamian experience. And I also want to announce that Festival Place will close at the end of this month for a 6-month renovation program, Mr. Speaker, and that's to improve that general area. And I want to thank the Minister of Transport, both ministers and the Minister of Transport, for the work they're doing to improve the services, particularly the transportation services out there at the Prince George Dock. Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, it is so fundamental that if we don't fix the product, we'll lose the business. We have to appreciate this one single thing, Mr. Speaker. Many countries got sunshine and sea. What makes us unique is who we are. What they don't have is they don't have the Bahamian people. What they don't have is they don't have our experiences. The Fox Hill Festival that Mitchell is so much behind every year, member for Fox Hill is so behind every year, always talking about the historical value of it, Mr. Speaker. That's who we are. That's what we're all about. And we have to make sure that we are delivering a high-quality product every single day. It is not right that in Jamaica they have 63 tours, and in Nassau we got 13. Something can't be right about that, Mr. Speaker. And it ain't right that every single day we are saying that we have a lot to offer and we don't. So we are working in the Ministry of Tourism to ensure that we create more tours, that we create more activity, that we have more entertainment, that we bring more culture back. And, Mr. Speaker, that is why I intend to speak with Mr. James Catlin, and I intend to speak with Nicolette Bethel, both of whom are in the production of shows. James Catlin and friends, of course, and, of course, Nicolette Bethel, who's been working on Sammy Swain. Because if you come to this island, there are no shows. There's nothing to go to. So why can't the Ministry of Tourism work with them? And I've already spoken to my colleague minister responsible for culture. We're going to be working together to cause these shows to become 6-month shows or 1-year shows, Mr. Speaker, so that we can include those in packages, not only for the Bahamians, Mr. Speaker, but also for the foreigners coming to our country and looking for part of our culture. Mr. Speaker, that is so important because we have to get our culture back out there. And so you have to spend money for it to happen, you have to make things happen, and then you put it out there for display. Because, Mr. Speaker, we must remember, nothing for Bahamians to see. I mean, you know, one of the things that we pay no attention to, I was looking at the American tourism program. They have a $150 million tourism program that they have announced, Mr. Speaker. But important in their tourism program, a component is domestic tourism. Well, Mr. Speaker, well, wasn't South Andrews last weekend domestic tourism? Mr. Speaker, let me tell you, all of our islands could generate more activity if we had more events going on from domestic tourism. And if we had, and the Ministry of Tourism is going to have someone who's going to be responsible for causing for packages to be created with the hotels, with the airlines, and with transport to reduce the cost that it is now to go to the various islands, to generate more business, not only around whether it's a regatta or an event such as that, but other events that's taking place in the islands, Mr. Speaker. That's what we're going to do. Mr. Speaker, we forget this important point, that we have about 500 hotels in the Bahamas, but 90% of those hotels, 90% of those hotels are small hotels, and 90% of those hotels are in the family islands. So we've got to generate more business, Mr. Speaker, to those islands. Additionally, we also see the competition coming from the small or the second homeowners. Second homeowners have built a tremendous amount of homes all over this country. And what they have done, Mr. Speaker, is that they've been able to rent them out. They get as much as $2,000 a week for them, Mr. Speaker, and not as many Bahamians are involved. So we have to now find a way to cause more Bahamians to get involved, and also find a way to ensure that those persons of the second home, they do and should be paying some sort of fee for what they are providing, Mr. Speaker, because they're making $2,000 right now, and it's not correct, Mr. Speaker. So we have a team that's worked on it. We have a paper that's been prepared, and we are now going to present that to the government of the Bahamas for consideration, Mr. Speaker, again, to ensure that we're able to make our country much more successful than it is, and to benefit from the tourism industry, because the large numbers of people are coming. But how we are, well, we'd love to do that. We'd love to get a cruise ship to the islands. Mr. Speaker, just let me turn to cruise ships, as the member for Long Island has just asked. Mr. Speaker, the cruise industry has been doing well in the Bahamas. In fact, Mr. Speaker, the truth is our numbers are being led by the cruise industry. Last year, we welcomed 5.9 million people to the Bahamas. The majority of those people came on cruise ships, Mr. Speaker. And even now, today, the numbers will be up by about 5% over last year. So it tells you the numbers will continue to grow. And, Mr. Speaker, we understand that that's why we have to get the numbers of the airlift up. Last year, we ended with about 1.3 million. Now we got to get the numbers up to about 1.8, 1.9. And then in 2014 and beyond, we've got to get the number up to 2.5, Mr. Speaker. So we know what we have to do. The cruise industry has done extremely well in the Bahamas. It's brought business to our country, and, Mr. Speaker, we're just waiting for some numbers to be released from the central bank, because we do believe that the spend has increased as well, Mr. Speaker. And because that is happening, it tells us that we have a synergy that's working. But what's concerning the cruise industry today is the crime. We met with them earlier last week, Mr. Speaker. They've expressed to us their concern. They've issued warnings on the cruise ship, and they've asked their visitors to be their passengers to be very careful. I was in one of the restaurants last week, Mr. Speaker, and I was disappointed because although we had a number of visitors on shore, the restaurants did not have many people in them. And that's unusual because just a month before, they had. What is happening, Mr. Speaker, if they are cautious, if they have fear, they're not going to go. Mr. Speaker, and so we should understand, and so we are talking with the cruise lines every day, and they're working with us every day. And I want to thank the Minister of National Security and the Commissioner of Police who have extended themselves. The Commissioner, in fact, came to our meeting last Thursday and spoke with the cruise lines to inform them of the plan and to discuss with them what needs to happen, Mr. Speaker. And so we're putting together a white paper. That white paper will outline what the Ministry of Tourism, Ministry of Transport, Ministry of National Security, all working together to ensure that the tourist zones, we have higher presence of security, whether it's police or private security. We're also going to put some mules on Bay Street, and that's, that's those powered machines to ensure that the mules, that's like, yeah, they're like golf carts, but they're much faster. That's really why they call them mules. They're much faster. They're intended to have heavy presence day and night. Because one of the difficulties we do face is nighttime. The truth is, at nighttime, when there's no one in the area where the clubs are still open, the visitor wants to still come out. And when you have young people out having a good time, drinking, then we have to make sure the security is there. So we want to increase the presence of security with the police force and even the Ministry of Tourism. Remember, we talked about police tourism before, and we also talked about having tourism police before, and we also talked about having in place and ensuring that we have a higher presence.
Remember, just address the chair, please.
I don't know. I can't. I don't know. I have to find out. But a good question. She's asked why can't Bahamas take a cruise ship from NASA anymore. I think because the point of origin is America, and it's the cost, I think. We'll have to check it out, though. I'll find out. I'm not sure. I'll find out. But, Mr. Speaker, the point is, sir, that we are working with the cruise lines because the cruise lines have brought business to the Bahamas. They continue to bring business to the Bahamas. We have a relationship with the cruise lines. The Ministry of Transport has been working very well with the cruise lines over the berthing issue because there was a problem at one point with the scheduling, but that has been worked out now. And so every day we're working to ensure that we generate a relationship that's everlasting and that causes us to be able to grow the tourism industry as we must grow the tourism industry. Mr. Speaker, let me just say that one of the things we've been talking about in here is how do we ensure that we develop the fly fishing industry to the levels that it must be. Mr. Speaker, the truth is we have some of the best flats in the world. And you have thousands of people who come to the Bahamas, all mostly high-end people with lots of money to spend, and they come. Mr. Speaker, I want to make sure that we all know that we now have in place the Bahamas Fly Fishing Industry Association, Mr. Speaker. And I want you to know that Benjamin Pratt for the Ministry of Tourism is heading it now, and we're going to have a major announcement next week in the island of Andros, where we're going to cause for, and now all bone fishermen and those in fly fishing generally, they're going to be able to have a license for the first time in the history of the Commonwealth of Bahamas. I want to thank the Attorney General's Office for the work in which they have done to cause this to happen, Mr. Speaker. It's been years. We've been working on this. It's now completed, Mr. Speaker, and I'm not going to say work started a long time ago, even continued during the former administration, but is now completed, Mr. Speaker, and now we're going to see this in a proper manner system. And, Mr. Speaker, with the support of the Cabinet, this is going to be a heavy revenue earner for the Bahamas government, Mr. Speaker. Again, another way to earn revenue for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. So, Mr. Speaker, we are now completed, and we feel very good about that. And I feel that, I think the Minister of Agriculture talked about that recently as well, to make sure that it works, and it's going to work, Mr. Speaker. I feel very good. It's partnership. Great partnership is going to work for us, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker.
In our heads.
Yes, sir.
And it's more than just a dream. I've been And it's more than just a dream.
That's true. You have. No, you have. No, we're not going to say, you know, with respect, Long Island, you have. You have, Long Island. Nobody's saying you haven't. You have. You did discuss it with us before, and you've raised it. Because in your constituency, you have a lot of them, too. I have them in Bimini, Andros, we know. We're good government. We listen. So we're not going to leave Long Island out of this. Not at all. Not at all. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, one of the greatest moments I felt as a member of Parliament came to me on Saturday, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I was about to travel with my colleague, Minister Gibson, and the Minister Gibson and the member for Mount Moriah. We were about to travel to Grand Bahama last week, Mr. Speaker. And as it's a rough crew to be with, you know, yeah. I had to hold more with them. You know? So we were traveling last week to Grand Bahama, Mr. Speaker, and as I walked through the airport, a young lady rushed up to me. There were three of them, and one rushed up to me, and she hugged me, and she said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." And I wasn't sure what she was thanking me for. And she said, I said, "Where are you going?" She said, "I'm going to Bimini." She said, "I'm going to work, Mr. Speaker." And she said, "I haven't worked since 2008, Mr. Speaker," and tears was coming down her eyes, Mr. Speaker. That was the most touching moment for me, and I ain't gonna lie, I got a little choked up myself, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and I want to say this, and I want to thank the Prime Minister. And I want to thank the Prime Minister because he has spent a lot of time on this project. And let's go back in history. Let's remember when the RAV project started. The F&M was at the helm. There were some difficulties with the project initially. When we became government in 2002, the Prime Minister met with Mr. Geraldo Capo and asked Mr. Capo to downsize the project because it was just too much for Bimini. He listened. He worked with the government. He's worked with all governments. And at the end of the day, he's brought the project to where it is. Now the Genting Group, one of the resort groups in the world, gaming groups in the world, Mr. Speaker, they have now come to the Bahamas, and they've gone to the island of Bimini, and they have now brought to Bimini a new beginning. Bimini is in a different time zone right now, so to speak, Mr. Speaker. Right now, Mr. Speaker, and I've been working with Minister Mitchell, Mr. Speaker, Fox Hill, because right now, the great problem in Bimini, they don't have enough space in Bimini even for the staff to live. Every place in Bimini is rented out, Mr. Speaker. There's no place to live. Mr. Speaker, do you know what that means? And do you know that still more employees have to go to Bimini, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, and do you know that means that all the people of Bimini are going to benefit? All new opportunities for the folks of Bimini? There'll be more policemen going to Bimini. There'll be more customs and immigration. More people at the gaming board. The chairman of the gaming board and his board is meeting in Bimini Thursday, I think. They're going down to meet there, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the truth is, Bimini is now about to become a complete destination. Bimini, we will never surrender or compromise Bimini's integrity. We will never compromise its history. We'll never compromise what Bimini is, the gateway to the Bahamas. Never will, Mr. Speaker. But what we will do is ensure that we improve in the educational system, to ensure that the young people of Bimini get even better education and they can stay home in Bimini. We're going to improve the healthcare system, Mr. Speaker, and the infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. And we're now working with Genting to cause for the expansion of the airport, which will take place over several phases. But we're causing it to happen in the beautification, Mr. Speaker. And we're going to fix the community in Allenstown and create new opportunities so that Biminites could own more businesses and be a part of this new day in Bimini, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, it represents major success. Major success, and now we must make it work. And, Mr. Speaker, we had a chance to visit the superfast ferry, the only 7 in the world. We went on it. They call it the Maserati of the seas. And it's going to take, Mr. Speaker, Biminites and others are going to be able to travel between Miami and Bimini 2 hours. 2 hours, Mr. Speaker, at a cost of $49 round trip. $49 round trip. That's going to be the fee. So they're going to be moving people in and out of Bimini twice a day, Mr. Speaker. And the inaugural cruise is the 28th of this month, Mr. Speaker. And the casino in Bimini will open July 1st this year, Mr. Speaker. That's happening right now, Mr. Speaker. So I feel very good today as a member of Parliament of Bimini, but I also know that we must manage the growth. I also know we must never cause for it to overwhelm the community. We must also ensure that we never compromise who and what Bimini is. That wonderful destination where Martin Luther King came, Adam Clayton Powell came, and Ernest Hemingway came. We must never compromise what Bimini stands for. We must never cause people to believe that they own it. No, we own it. It's our place. It's our home. And the people of Bimini will never be pushed out of their home, Mr. Speaker. They'll always be a part of this new beginning. Our job is to create economic opportunities. That's what we're doing, Mr. Speaker. And what you're seeing of Biminites returning home, you're also seeing many who have been unemployed in this capital city in Grand Bahama going to the island of Bimini, Mr. Speaker. And I'm so very proud of that today. And I know my job is just starting because we have to manage it and make it work. And to all my colleagues who have been working hard for this to happen, I wish to thank them very much on behalf of the good people of Bimini, Mr. Speaker. Yeah. Mr. Speaker, let me just say that we're also now focused on Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, there's a lot of criticism of Bahamas, but, Mr. Speaker, the truth is we have to take responsibility for the thought, the idea, the vision. And the truth, Mr. Speaker, is this is the IMF report released earlier this year, Mr. Speaker, that points to, it says that Bahamas, speaks about Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. It says that the project is having an important impact on the Bahamian economy. That's what IMF says, that it's having an important impact on the Bahamian economy. On the Bahamian economy. Mr. Speaker, the member for Central and South Andros and Mangrove Key spoke about this earlier. The Prime Minister allowed me to travel with the delegation led by himself and the Minister of Foreign Affairs to meet with the Chinese president. And when the whole Bahama project came up, one of the things that the Prime Minister emphasized is the need for even more Bahamians to be included in this project. The Prime Minister welcomed the project because, you know, he was the one behind the project in the first place. And the truth is, he told them that we want more Bahamians to be working and more Bahamians to benefit from this project, Mr. Speaker. He made that very clear, and the President in response agreed with the Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, he took the leadership, he took it to Trinidad, and he spoke with the President. He was very clear, and he made it very, very, very clear what we expected, Mr. Speaker. And the truth is, it is having an economic impact. We wanted to have a great economic impact for the Bahamian people, Mr. Speaker. We want more of our young men and young women to find work. We want more of our people to have opportunities to own some of the businesses at Bahama. We want more, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, I know that Bahama intends to have one of the largest gaming resorts in the Caribbean. And yes, it intends to, Mr. Speaker, gaming. Gaming is going to be big as part of what they offer. And I had the opportunity to travel with Bahama, its president, to Macau recently for the announcement that they were bringing in someone with experience, or a group with experience, global gaming management company. They're coming from Las Vegas, the Philippines, Macau. They've had experiences in all the new developments and, of course, Las Vegas. Mr. Speaker, they intend to bring the wealth of their knowledge and information to the table because, truth be told, they're going to have to introduce some new things to gaming, Mr. Speaker, one of which is junkets. And that is why the legislation that we're considering today has to come to Parliament sooner rather than later, Mr. Speaker, because we have to ensure that we improve our legislation. We have to modernize gaming if we're going to be in the game. Mr. Speaker, if we're not going to be in the game, then let's just back out. But to be a competitor, you have to ensure that you have the games. Otherwise, you're going to be losing, Mr. Speaker. And so we know that there's some controversial areas. And we understand, Mr. Speaker, the whole this thought about Bahamians gambling, Mr. Speaker, but the truth is that's before the Constitutional Commission, so that's not going to be a part of the legislation, Mr. Speaker. And the truth is, who's going to be pushing for the foreigners to, or the expatriates in the Bahamas to be in the casino if the Bahamians will have the same opportunity? So don't expect that to be a part of the legislation, Mr. Speaker. The truth is, we're going to bring legislation that will make us competitive today. Legislation that allows for proxy, that allows for the sports betting, Mr. Speaker, that allows for the junkets, that allows for us to have mobile gaming, because we have to advance gaming now. And whether it's Grand Bahama, whether it's a capital city, or whether it's Bimini, these people are world competitors, Mr. Speaker, and they know what's required, and they have to attract people because it's an amenity. And I want to just make sure everyone understands, I never once said that we're going to turn the Bahamas into some gaming nation. No way, Mr. Speaker. I said gaming destination as an attraction. And even if some have said it, please, I said gaming destination, because, again, I want us also to be a fishing destination. I want us also to be a cultural destination. The whole idea is a part of the offering, Mr. Speaker, so you can get what you want in the Bahamas. That's the whole idea, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that more and more Bahamians would want to come, foreigners would want to come to visit our country and to be a part of all that we have to offer. That's what I'm talking about, Mr. Speaker. And so gaming is fundamentally important as we move forward, because it is an amenity. And we want to move from $150 million annually to something around $400 million or $500 million or $1 billion from gaming. Mr. Speaker, if we have the assets, let's use them. Let them pay for themselves. Let them cause for our economy to be stronger. Let them cause for, you saw a statement recently by George McIntosh when he said, listen, we're expanding our casino right now. And the expansion of our casino is going to cause an additional 200 employees, Mr. Speaker. That's what I'm talking about. More employees, more opportunities, more things to happen for our Commonwealth, Mr. Speaker. And right now, we are considering who's going to be the new casino operator in Grand Bahama. Mr. Speaker, the truth is, the new casino operator in Grand Bahama is to be decided. We hope to deal with that in a couple of weeks. But we've had as many as 12 companies showing interest. As many as 12, Mr. Speaker, and 2 of those companies are Bahamian, or Bahamian involvement, Mr. Speaker, and we are giving all the companies fair consideration. And when the recommendation comes to us, we will be able to cause for that company to be in, because, Mr. Speaker, the truth is we're getting ready for Sunwing. Sunwing will open in November this year in Grand Bahama at the Reef Hotel, Mr. Speaker. And, Mr. Speaker, construction is to begin soon, and I understand some work has started now, Mr. Speaker, and further, Mr. Speaker, 1,000 employees, no less than 1,000 employees are going to be working there when that new hotel opens, and there'll be additional employees at the casino, Mr. Speaker. We're going to turn Grand Bahama around. We're going to bring new airlift to Grand Bahama. We're going to get new cruise ships to come to Grand Bahama. And, Mr. Speaker, we're also working with others in some other hotels right now. It's too soon to talk about it, Mr. Speaker. But the truth is, we know we're going to turn Grand Bahama around, and Sunwing, working with Hutchison Whampoa, working with the Ministry of Tourism, and my good friend, the minister responsible for Grand Bahama, all working to cause this to happen, Mr. Speaker. And I'm so looking forward to it, Mr. Speaker, because I've seen the hurt. I've seen the hurt. I've seen the hurt of the people in Grand Bahama, Mr. Speaker, and I know the pain that they've gone through. And so, Mr. Speaker, we're going to be working diligently to cause this to happen as quickly as we possibly can, Mr. Speaker, because we want to get Bahamians out of the pain that they've been going through. I am from Grand Bahama, Mr. Speaker. I know the pain of the people of my community. I've seen the things that they've gone through, and truth be told, ever since we allowed for that Driftwood group to come to Grand Bahama with that hotel that they didn't know anything about, and the mess of the casino for $1 a year, ridiculous what we did there, Mr. Speaker, that moved out, took the insurance money and gone, and never looked back. Mr. Speaker, the worst thing we ever did, Mr. Speaker, and we should never have done that. That was a bad decision, and we today are still paying the price for that, Mr. Speaker. When we go back and look at history, when we review history at some time, we're going to see that Driftwood has been the worst decision that ever made in the tourism industry, Mr. Speaker, because it hurt Grand Bahama tremendously, hurt Grand Bahama tremendously, and we're still paying the price for that, Mr. Speaker. Now our job is to rebuild. And, Mr. Speaker, that's why it's important. Whatever decisions we make, we must make decisions that will allow for sustainability. You can't just allow somebody to come in the door and can't sustain themselves. We've got to call for the sustainability. Anybody who comes, any business we're talking to, and all of us got some experience now, so they can't play no games on us anymore, because we've had some who try to play the games. So we're going to now come to the table knowing what we want, and we're going to make decisions in the interest of our people, not for today, not for the election, but for the next 5 to 10, 15 years, Mr. Speaker. That's what we're going to, when we're out of the picture. We want to make sure our people can live beyond, Mr. Speaker. That's what we want to do. And so new opportunities are going to come, and in Grand Bahama in particular. And I want everyone in this Parliament to know that the Ministry of Tourism is going to be playing a major role in this, Mr. Speaker, because the Ministry of Tourism digital platform and all of its public relations is going now to be relocated to the island of Grand Bahama, Mr. Speaker. We're taking the technology to Grand Bahama, where all of our IT is going to be in Grand Bahama, Mr. Speaker, because we're going to emanate, we're going to market the Bahamas from the world, to the world from Grand Bahama. Mr. Speaker, you're going to be able to, Mr. Speaker, you're going to be able to see this, Mr. Speaker, where we will have employees, and some of our employees are going to be reassigned. You're going to have a team just selling Grand Bahama. You're going to have a team just selling Abaco. You're going to have a team just selling Eleuthera. A team just selling New Providence, all on the social network, Mr. Speaker. That's all they do all day, just sell. Talk about the assets we have. Talk about our product. Talk about the Bahamas, working with the airlift and everything else. The whole idea, Mr. Speaker, the world has changed. We got to change with the world. We got to be on the social network, so we're going to take it all. And we're going to have our call center. We're going to have our digital platform, all in Grand Bahama, because we're sending a message. And you've heard the the Minister for Financial Services talk about it. We can cause Grand Bahama to become the IT center of the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker, but we got to show the confidence first. And if we show the confidence, trust me, others are going to follow, Mr. Speaker, and the Ministry of Tourism is going to lead the way in Grand Bahama. So the office that exists today will be turned into a different office, Mr. Speaker. Is going to become the digital platform center of the Ministry of Tourism, Mr. Speaker. And I'm so very proud of it, because we've been talking about it, we've been working on it, and we're going to put the pieces together and make it happen, Mr. Speaker. We're going to have, and for the first time, we're going to market every single island simultaneously, Mr. Speaker. Never done before. And we're going to introduce for the first time, and we're going to lead the way in tourism in the Caribbean. We're going to introduce online TV, Mr. Speaker, which will give you 24 hours of Ministry of Tourism activity throughout the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. That's where the world is, and we got to be a part of the world, Mr. Speaker. And we're not going to compromise. Watch the Ministry of Tourism change the entire way in which we do business to get our product out to the market, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to just move away from tourism for a second, Mr. Speaker. I want to talk about Bahamas Information Services. Mr. Speaker, I want to say thank you to Mr. Edward Ellis, who serves as Director of Bahamas Information Services now for many years. His retirement is now here, and he's now moving on. I met with him today, Mr. Speaker, and I've asked him to be a part of a core of individuals I'm putting together to begin to record the history of our country. He's a man of journalistic experience, been around this country. We don't have any history, Mr. Speaker. Who's writing your piece right now? You've got to write it yourself. Who's writing A.D. Hanna's piece right now? Who's writing Arthur Folk's piece right now, Mr. Speaker? Who's doing it? Mr. Speaker, we've been talking about it and talking about it. What we need now is to bring people into our employ and cause it to happen. Who's writing Albert Miller's piece? Who's writing the stories? Who's writing Hubert Ingram's piece or Perry Christie's piece? Who's putting it all together, Mr. Speaker? You cannot believe that you can have the history of the country and you don't have a morgue where you're putting the information, storing the information, getting it ready. You cannot talk about the future, Mr. Speaker. Who's writing the story of Bernard Knowledge or Alfred Gray? Who's writing the story of Hope or Michael Dobell? When he spoke, he talked about being the first minister for Grand Bahama. Well, who's writing that story? Or somebody's going to forget it. Who's writing the story of Kalani, Mr. Speaker, and the senior member, Nico Grant. Who's writing the story? He's the longest serving member from Grand Bahama. And although you're on the other side, we're proud of him. And the truth is, Mr. Speaker, at the end of the day, we want to make sure there's history. Because there's something wrong when we are always expecting somebody to tell our story. Let's tell our own story, Mr. Speaker. So let's put together the core people. And so now we are doing that, Mr. Speaker, and I've taken a strong position in doing it because Bahamas Information Services will become a stronger link to the Bahamas government. Bahamas Information Services, we will have reporters assigned, and there will be constant information about the Bahamas online, about the government of the Bahamas, and about the various ministries, Mr. Speaker, on a daily basis, because we are in an age where information is instant. But we're also in an age where information can be muddled, and we could be subjected to the scandalous entertainment. And the truth is, Mr. Speaker, it's destructive. When you run a country, you have to understand that we run a country based on the need to ensure that information is out there to empower the people of the country, Mr. Speaker. And that's what we are supposed to do. And that's why I could never understand when we don't understand the importance of the democracy that we're part of. Mr. Speaker, I've been working with the minister, the shadow minister of tourism, Mr. Bostrick, Senator Bostrick. We have an agreement. We're going to meet every month. So I can brief him and he can talk about the ideas. In fact, sir, in our very first meeting, he brought to me some ideas he has on dealing with the crime situation, Mr. Speaker. That's democracy. The leader of the opposition came to me one day and told me what an idea he had for out there in Delaport. But using the Kennedy, that square there, or that circle there. It's a great idea. We're going to take it up and do it, Mr. Speaker. See, Mr. Speaker, the Westminster system says that in a democracy, you agree that one party is going to win. And when that one party wins, you agree in opposition to help in the governance of the country, with the understanding that you will challenge within the next 5 years or the next general elections. That's the way it's supposed to work. That's the way it's supposed to work. That's why our job is not to fight with anybody. Our job is to talk. Our job is to come to an understanding on certain things. And so I want to thank the honorable senator, who is, and I must say, Mr. Speaker, he does have good ideas. He is a good ideas man, so I'm not going to ever say he doesn't have good ideas. And we have agreed to sit and talk about ideas that he has, about plans that we have to be able to build, because we're building a stronger tourism economy, Mr. Speaker. That's our plan, and that's what we're going to do. Mr. Speaker, I want to make sure that we have an economy we can be very pleased about. Mr. Speaker, but I also want to make sure that we understand in our country that we are not destroying it. Never to destroy it. Mr. Speaker, I was so very pleased when the Prime Minister announced that sports program. And of course, he's given it to the right minister because, you know, it wasn't out of his mouth good, and the minister was out of here making announcements, so you know how he goes. He can make it happen. Identifying land already. I can tell you why, Mr. Speaker. I grew up in sport. I served as president of the Grand Bahama Basketball Association and president of the Commonwealth American Football League. Mr. Speaker, I remember when Moon McPhee came to Grand Bahama. We talked about basketball. And I became president. And one of the things, we didn't have a wooden floor in Grand Bahama, Mr. Speaker, in 1989. We didn't have a wooden floor in Grand Bahama. And I remember when I spoke to a young man by the name of O'Brien Roll, and you met O'Brien Roll. I spoke to O'Brien Roll, and I said, O'Brien, we could build a floor, and he thought I was crazy at first. But then he agreed to build the floor, Mr. Speaker. This is a carpenter, you know. He's a carpenter. We built a floor, Mr. Speaker. He built the floor over a 3-month period. Built a floor in the gymnasium. And, Mr. Speaker, I think we still owe him for the floor because we couldn't pay him all the money.
Oh, you need to pay him. You need that money.
But, Mr. Speaker, the truth is, he built the floor. That floor lasted from 1987, 88, 89 until 2005 when the hurricane ripped it apart. You see that? That was the wooden floor in Grand Bahama. And on that wooden floor, Mr. Speaker, Grand Bahama won its first the National Basketball Championship. Island Lobsters. Very first one, Mr. Speaker. And you know what it did to the young men to be able to go play on the wooden floor every day? You know how they felt to be playing on that wooden floor every day? It lifted them up, made them feel like, hey, I could do this, anybody could do this, I'm playing on the wooden floor. Same wooden floor I see at Parquet, the same wooden floor I see on television in Boston, or in LA, or in New York, in Miami. The truth is, Mr. Speaker, it makes a difference. So for us to put that kind of money in the budget right now, I'm looking forward to my track in 8 Mile Rock. Yes. My sports center, 8 Mile Rock, because 8 Mile Rock got some of the best athletes ever, Mr. Speaker. John Martin, one of my great friends, he who has passed away, one of the greatest athletes this country has ever seen, Mr. Speaker. One of the greatest athletes, Kenneth Smith, Rangoon, all sorts of great athletes, Mr. Speaker. The former member of Parliament who was in here, Lindy Russell, great athletes. His wife, Nell, great athletes. Cheryl, great athletes. Plenty great athletes down there, Mr. Speaker. But we don't have the facilities. Now we need the facilities, Mr. Speaker. And I'm very pleased that we're going to do that because it's going to enhance our athletes, it's going to enhance the opportunities, it's going to help them with their individual self-esteem, it's going to help us to become greater, Mr. Speaker. So I'm very pleased, I'm very happy that we're going to proceed with it. Mr. Speaker, this budget that we have brought to this place, Mr. Speaker, I think is a great budget. I feel very good about what the government is intending to do. Mr. Speaker, at no time have we ever said that we are perfect beings. At no time have we ever said that we got all the right answers. But collectively, we believe that we have, first of all, the will, we have the energy, and we believe that together we can make it happen, Mr. Speaker. We believe that we can take the ideas from each person. We could build on the ideas from Elizabeth, build on the ideas from Macau, take the ideas from Engliston, take the ideas from Cat Island, take the ideas from Fox Hill or from Carmichael. That we could all come together and we could talk about what could happen. We could agree to disagree agreeably. And at the end of the day, bring before this country programs, plans, actions. Sit with the opposition, agree with them too. And when they're right, give them the right. And when they're wrong, tell them they're wrong. But we could build a strong country, Mr. Speaker, and we could make a difference. Mr. Speaker, just before I conclude, I want to refer to something, Mr. Speaker, written by Lyndon Pinley. Mr. Speaker, it's called Building a Nation Through Peace, Understanding, and Love. Mr. Speaker, and he dedicated this to Clarence Bain, after Clarence Bain passed. Mr. Speaker, these are his words, and I want to quote him, and I want to quote something from Perry Christie. He says, in the world and all around us, the gap is widening. In some places it is widening faster than in others. Wherever and whenever the gap becomes a gulf, there is an explosion, a violent revolution. Whenever and wherever the gap can be closed, albeit by a series of serious continuing efforts, there will be peace. I believe in peace. The effective tools of peace are understanding and love. There is need to be ever vigilant, ever open-minded, and ever searching for a philosophy, a system, and a method that will enable us to improve our ability to recognize the need for change. Through understanding and love, the gap could be narrowed and eliminated. Through understanding and love, there will be peace in our beautiful Bahama Islands. His Excellency Kenneth Kaunda, President of Zambia, has admonished, time does not come for leaders of any given revolution unless they appreciate there is time for change and the need to remold their society. We of the Progressive Liberal Party are the leaders of a revolution, but as a party, we have not yet begun to think of remolding our society. I am one of those who feel that the time has come, that now is indeed another time for change. The Progressive Liberal Party cannot afford to fail to recognize the urgency of the need to make radical changes in the structure of our society. Mr. Speaker, the truth is, that's what we're doing. That's what Perry Christie is doing. He has said, Mr. Speaker,
Right, Honourable Member
and
Centerville.
Mr. Speaker, that is what the member for Centerville said. He talked about change, fixing our administration, causing for better management, causing, and at the same time said, notwithstanding all that we have to do, we're going to strengthen our police force. We're going to strengthen our education. We're going to make sure that our young men and young women get opportunities. We're going to look at how we're going to come to them and make them better, Mr. Speaker. That is why we believe that when we fix the things and do the things we are intending to do, we can then collectively say, march on, Bahama land. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Member. As many. The Chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Bain and Grandstand.
Mr. Speaker, it is our intention
Honorable members, you have honorable members, the members on the floor.
it is our intention to suspend the House at this time to 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, at which time the remaining speakers will make their contributions, and then we intend to go into the committee stage and deal with all the bills during the course of the day tomorrow, and the resolution. So,
And the intention would be to complete tomorrow.
sorry, it is our intention to do so. It depends on how long they decide to keep us here with the head-to-head. So I now move that the House suspends until 10 a.m. Tuesday, 18th of June.
Thank you. It has been moved and second that the following resolution be agreed. Be it resolved that the business of this House suspends until 10 a.m. tomorrow, the 18th of June, in the year of our Lord, 2013. As many are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The business of this House suspends until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, the 18th of June.
Ends this afternoon session a little earlier than expected, but tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. We just heard from the member for West Grand Bahama and Bimini, Minister of Tourism, the Honorable Obi Wilchcomb. Wide-ranging address, moving the digital platform for the Ministry of Tourism to Grand Bahama and reworking that office. Any number of new initiatives, closing down Festival Place for 6 months of renovation. Just a whole lot of information that you will hear a lot more about in the coming days as we report to you on this budget communication. Tomorrow, the member for Baines and Grandstown, a lead of government business in the House, Dr. Bernard Nottage, and of course the wrap-up from Prime Minister Christie before members go into the individual heads and go over the specific allocations. Again, debate concluded for today. We just heard from the Minister of Tourism, the Honorable Obi Wilchcomb, talking about all the things that he expects to happen in tourism, revisiting some old things. For example, going back into groups, into the group business, opening offices that have been closed for years now, Atlanta, London, putting people on the street, something that hasn't been done at the Ministry of Tourism for quite some time now. And so it will be left to see exactly what will happen as a result of these new initiatives being planned by the Minister and the Ministry of Tourism. And so, again, that's it from here at the House of Assembly. We'll be back with you tomorrow morning, which, again, in itself will be unusual because the Cabinet usually meets at 10 o'clock, at 9 o'clock on Tuesday morning. But what's going to happen is members are going to return to the House and deal with this budget debate because, of course, it must also go to the Senate for debate before going on to the Governor General for his signature. And so, till 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'm Anthony Newbold. Have a good evening.